Hello, hello. Uh-huh. All right. Let's see. Okay, looks like mic is working. Ah, video is working. Okay, I think actually I got this set up a lot faster this time. Oh, so here's the obligatory, hey everyone, Anark here, and this is another live stream. So now I need to get people into this. Hi, Ilyuni. I assume that's how you say that. So let me share this link around. Liked the stream since you did the intro. It's that easy. Y'all are so easy to please. Okay. Why can I not find the link? Okay, I got it. I got it. Almost ready to go. Boom. Putting in different places. Uni. Okay, well, there it is. Thank you for correcting me. Am I looking fine today, Eli? I feel like I got very chapped lips. Kind of self-conscious about my chapped lips. No background music? No background music on the live streams, I'm afraid. I don't even think I know how to do background music on the live streams. Looking like a bee? Yeah, I'll take that. That's fair. Looking like a bee. It's true. Don't worry, the picture quality is not picking it up. Okay. You know, the thing is, it's funny. In my streaming software, this camera has much higher resolution. It looks really crispy. But for some reason, when it records or streams, it loses a considerable amount of quality. And I actually don't know why that is. I've gone in and I've messed with the settings. It doesn't seem to make any difference. So kind of odd, but I'm sure somebody is like sitting there like, yeah, Daniel, you didn't do this very obvious, easy thing, but gonna do a video responding to Bolshevik apologists. Yeah, that's a good idea. Diamond Skull says, hey, Anark, Diamond Skull here. Politically savvy, but not tech savvy. You know, I got like a baseline of understanding of technology. I'm no expert. Josh Judge says, hey, Anark, what do you think about democratic confederalism and using it as a sort of stepping stone to establish anarchism? I don't know if it is a stepping stone to achieve anarchism. It's kind of hard. Okay, I assume you mean that you like using it as like some sort of transitionary structure. But what I'd like to emphasize is that democratic confederalism as laid out by Öcalan is already pretty anarchistic. I mean, it is an anti-state philosophy of organization. So in a way, it's already very anarchistic. But in practice, what we're seeing in Rojava is that it is not entirely anarchistic. So I don't know if that's really the fault of Öcalan and democratic confederalism, or if that is the fault of the development of their political structures. That being said, in the video after the revolution, it's got a lot of democratic confederalism in it. Nice. Thanks, Parallax. 1515 MYR. Just demonstrating my ignorance. I don't know what the name of that is, that currency. But Parallax says, good early morning from Southeast Asia. Yeah, here it is 1 p.m. in good old cold but sunny Oklahoma. Oh, I just realized I'm on Top Chat. How will anime be made under anarchism? People will draw anime, and then it will be distributed. I know it's a pretty deep answer, but yeah, people will make anime. They make anime because there's no longer anything keeping them from making anime. You know, how many things would I do if only there was no structures forcing me to work to do menial labor in order to make enough wages to live? I would probably do all kinds of really cool and fun things. Parallax says it's a Malaysian ringgit. I just learned something. So let's see here. Uni says, how do you feel that your video on Second Thought gained significantly more views than your more theory-based videos? Yeah, way more than a lot of my theory-based videos. In fact, that Second Thought video did better than the majority of my video essays, which is a bit disappointing. But honestly, viewers like criticism. They like streamer drama and YouTube drama. You know, I've even found myself, when I see a video in my subscriptions pop up and it is them about to be critical or about to like debunk somebody, you know, I actually am a little more likely to click that video. I think it's because, I don't know, you assume it'll be kind of spicy and maybe that'll be a little entertaining. But also, that video was requested by numerous people. Like, lots of people reached out to me after Second Thought released that video and said that they really thought that there needed to be a response to that. And generally, I don't do response videos. I don't like doing react videos. I think it's kind of a shallow form of content. No offense intended to anybody who does it. But I think it's a shallow form of content. I think that there are a lot of perverse incentives involved insofar as that you try to start drama in order to get views and so on. But my approach was more that I thought there really just needed to be a methodological response that everybody could go watch. And yeah, I think that made the video a little more popular. Second Thought's video had already proliferated into people's algorithm. He has like 1.6 million followers. So that meant that if they had watched it, my video was very likely to pop up. My video is apparently the video it was most highly recommended on was Second Thought's video on authoritarianism. So after you watch Second Thought's video on authoritarianism, there was a very high chance that my video responding to it was going to be one of the main responses. If you go search Second Thought authoritarianism, I'm the second result. And I assume all of this together is the reason that video did so well. That being said, I think it is much less substantive than the video essays I've produced on this channel. If this is your first time coming around to the channel, you know, obviously if you're just looking for kind of brief introductions and baseline stuff, you know, you could watch the Anark abridged videos. Those would probably be a pretty good introduction. But I would just like to emphasize that the video essays are where I spend the vast majority of my efforts on this channel. You know, the Anark abridged videos or even that Anark React video, I do them in one evening, okay? Whereas the video essays take me months. These last 3 video essays of Modern Anarchism, part 1, 2, and 3, each of these took me like between 9 and 10 months to complete. So just to give you an idea of the scale of difference in the amount of effort I'm putting into the different kind of videos on this channel. if Anark Abridged is helpful for you, I encourage you to keep watching, of course. Obviously, a lot of people are here since I've begun doing Anark Abridged videos every week. But please go watch the video essays. I put so much effort into them. And in my mind, that's really what I want the channel to be known for, are those big video essays and the theory pieces. So hopefully we pull people in with the easier stuff and they stick around for the video essays. And on that note, of course, I'm on part 4. I'm about to be, or I am trying to finish the script for part 4 by the end of the year. That is going to be on the topic of organization. That being said, also, I just want to say I appreciate all of you being here, and I just want to note, if you are trying to push this right now while I'm live in the algorithm, you should click like. I even think like comments below might help. Obviously, all of you in the chat here, I think that helps. But also, if you want to support the channel, you should go over and become a patron at patreon.com/Anark, and the tiers are like $2, $5. $7, I think it's like 10 or 12 or something, and $20. So any of those are incredibly helpful for me. I really appreciate all of you supporting me on the channel. And I just want to emphasize that the reason why that the quality of these videos, the editing of these videos is starting to get better and better is because of those patrons. You know, as my Patreon approaches being able to give me like completely full-time income, that means that I can rationally devote more of my time to improving the quality of everything that I release. So you might have noticed the editing on that second thought video was quite a bit more in depth than the editing usually is on one of those Anark Abridged videos. But I would like to make that the standard, and I think I'd be more able to make that standard if I can devote full-time effort to the channel. But anyway, also, big reason I'm doing this is it's a 20K celebration stream. I thought, you know, I've been doing these, you know, benchmark celebration streams a lot of the time. And I do them before I gain that benchmark because I keep thinking like, oh, by next week I'll have it, and then I don't. Oh, by next week I'll have it, and then I don't. But after the second thought video, I've gained like 1,700 subscribers. So yeah, actually now I've well surpassed 20K. I think about like 21.5 or something like that as of right now. So it has gone pretty far. Hi Tofute, thank you for becoming a YouTube member, which is basically like being a patron on Patreon. So if any of y'all want to subscribe through YouTube, there's also a sort of Patreon-esque system here on YouTube. You can go become a member of all of those same tiers that I just listed a minute ago. So I appreciate it, Tofute. So let's see all the things that... what are people saying here? Andrea Athos. The only thing I'll say is that the guy said such absurd things that not even the average Trotskyist supports. For example, he said the Bolsheviks had separation of powers. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely absurd to think the Bolsheviks had separation of powers. That being said, I don't remember that exact claim within that video. He may have said it elsewhere. But no, the Bolshevik party, the central party, made all of the decisions. They had absolute veto control over everything. And that veto control and that absolute control really became more and more thorough as time went on. But right off the bat, within the first month, they started to have veto control over any delegate that was chosen by people upon the factory floor, and they could suggest alternative delegates instead. And it was only a few months in when the workers were already very upset with this. If you want to learn more about that, you should go watch my video, The State is Counter-Revolutionary, Part 2, where I talk about the USSR. So let's see here. Indra Kiss says, got 3 questions. 1, do you plan on doing co-op videos? I hadn't had in mind that I was going to do a video just about cooperatives. The closest you're probably going to find is me talking about them in the Constructing the Revolution. However, eventually I do plan on doing a video that is about economics. It's just going to be a video about economics. And in that video, obviously, there will be discussion of cooperatives. Number 2, what do you think of Vosh? I've answered this question too many times, not going to answer it anymore. 3, is it wrong to watch porn as a leftist? No, I think that it's a really weird puritanical stance that people have about that a lot of the time. Sex work is just like any other work in society. It has no more or less moral implications, even though obviously lots of sex workers are exploited in ways which are quite disgusting. But that doesn't mean that watching porn, nor even the production of porn, is anti-leftist, because leftism is not a puritanical ideology. I think this stance is sort of like comically attached to like Maoists and stuff. Or maybe like second wave feminists, who a lot of them became swerfs and turfs. Silfrina says, do you think anarchist societies would be just as able to protect themselves from outside invaders as states? What if Ukraine was anarchist when Russia attacked? Yes, I do believe that is the case. In fact, we can see that decentralization of the military is the direction that militaries are moving towards in the modern era, and that decentralization and guerrilla warfare and confederation of militia structures appears to be one of the best responses to centralized army apparatuses. That being said, what if Ukraine was anarchist when Russia attacked? I don't know. There's too much hypotheticals in that. There's too many possible minor details that could come into answering a question like that. So I have no idea. Like, okay, had Ukraine been anarchist since like 1917? Was it just anarchist 5 years ago? Has it, like all of those things would matter in answering that question, An anarchist method, just because it is possibly effective, doesn't mean that, it's instantly effective, and it doesn't need time to develop and structure itself. So I would say Russia is a substantial military, and it is unlikely that it would just be able to muster a response instantly, or a Ukrainian anarchism, if it were to exist, would not necessarily be able to muster a response instantly if it had just come into existence like the year before or something. That would be very challenging, I think. But yeah, so that's kind of too hypothetical to answer, I think. NPIC Revolt says, speaking of 20K subs, major congrats on being in the top 1% of YouTube channels in terms of subs. Is that right? Top 1%, huh? Well, it's interesting because in those top 1%, top 0.1% and all that, it's sort of exponential as you go, like if top 1% is 20K subs, looking at top 0.1% is probably like 200,000 or 300,000 or, something like that, just estimating. But yeah, that's cool though. Yeah. I mean, the channel is definitely growing. It's getting to a point, where I would say it's kind of a mid-sized YouTube channel, which is pretty cool. It's getting there. Let's see. I'm still trying to catch up. You all know how this is. I'm always behind. Sunbather. I mean, I'm just looking through. We can't blame streamer drama being popular in capitalism or power structures, though. I actually agree. In fact, I think one of the sad things I've had to conclude is that, honestly, viewers just want that. Like, people want the streamer drama. Like, it's entertaining to people, I think, and sometimes I think it's entertaining like they're watching a train wreck kind of thing. It's just the simple reality. They click the thumbnails that have the drama baiting, even if it's not drama baiting, even if it just suggests that there might be disagreement. Like mine was not drama baiting, it was like pretty respectful overall. The thumbnail was maybe a little goofy, but it was still just, showing it was a react video. But no, people ate it up. I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is like, that's actually what a lot of people want. But, you know, as any sort of creator, you're always trying to walk the line between trying to appeal to everyone, which is, say, you're kind of lowering your content to the lowest common denominator, or creating something that you think is beautiful and can appeal to people, and then trying to bring as many people to that as possible. And I'm always trying to err on the second. I'm always trying to create works that I think are beautiful and deep and important, and then hopefully make people see the value in those works, rather than trying to figure out where people are at and trying to create content that is just at that. Because if that's all I wanted to do, I could do it, y'all. I would do streams. I would do very long streams. I would do react videos all the time, responding to other big YouTubers, because that's a really good way to get pushed into the algorithm. I'd probably do lots of like video game streaming. I'd do debates and go on other people's channels and debate. I've made a conscious effort not to be that kind of channel, and to instead focus on making video essays and trying to make theory interesting, entertaining, accessible in a sense for lots of people, and to bring in an audience, what I would say is a quality audience rather than a quantity audience. Yeah, it's tough to make theory entertaining. The best we can do is what most right-wingers do, rate movies while rambling about how it reminds you of this event of history or something. Yeah, no, I personally just don't take that approach. Like I just said, you know, I'm going to take the approach of trying to bring people to the things I think are interesting. The things I'm passionate about, I'm going to try to see if I can make other people passionate and interested in them. Do you think we'll be doing more response videos after the success of the Second Thought one? No. I do not plan to, unless there's some significant response from Second Thought. Like if Second Thought does a response, I might respond to Second Thought's response, kind of thing, right? If, for example, some very big channel did a response to one of my videos, I might do a response to that. But I am certainly not going to be looking for more reacts, because I think that there's too many perverse incentives involved in that, kind of as I just described. I feel like many big anarchist YouTubers don't really make that many videos about anarchism, but maybe that's just me. Yeah, I think that's unfortunately the case. And obviously, if you look at the video essays on my channel, you even look at the Anark Abridged videos on my channel, you see that's not the case here. I really want to talk about political theory. I really want to make theory accessible to people. And I talk about anarchism in nearly every single video on the channel. Sim Not Sam says, hi. Hey there. Gotta always say hello to the patrons. Juanon says, hello there. Congratulations. Thank you. Yeah, channel's coming along. Feeling good about it. Andrea says, okay, I have a mixed feeling on BreadTube. On the one hand, I would like an Italian variant of BreadTube, but on the other hand, considering how BreadTube is combined today, I don't know. It's a good thing overall. You know, it's the way I look at it. This is just my perspective. YouTube is kind of like the modern parallel to what pamphleteering was back in the day, you know, going out with pamphlets and just handing them out to large numbers of people. You know, you're obviously going to be in your pamphlets trying to boil things down so that people can understand them. You're trying to make them appealing somehow. You're trying to make them persuasive, and you're doing that with large numbers of people. And yeah, there's going to be, you know, some things that'll go wrong in that process, and not every pamphlet is helpful. And in the same way, not every YouTuber or YouTube video is going to be what we would like it to be, but it's a way to reach a mass audience and to keep people's attention long enough to talk to them about important topics. So I actually think that in a general sense, it is good for the movement to have YouTubers. It's good for people, for the movement to have media personalities in a variety of different ways. And so, you know, part of what I'm doing here on YouTube is that I've been an organizer for like, let's see, 2011. It's been 12 years now. So I was an organizer long before I made a YouTube channel. And part of the purpose of creating this YouTube channel was to create a place to spread radical ideology. You know, this is part of praxis for me. It's not my only praxis. It's just a way, I think, to spread a radical consciousness while I'm continuing to do the other work that I'm doing. And I would suggest that people do the same. If you're a revolutionary, if you're a radical, consider doing the same thing. Yes, it is some substantial amount of work, but it's worth it. And it gets the ideas out there that might actually transform society. Danger Zone says, have you ever read the book Anarcho-Syndicalism? Yes, it's phenomenal. I think it's actually one of the best books on anarchism. In fact, I think that first chapter may very well be the best intro to anarchism I've ever read. Pretty much the only reason when somebody asks me, like, I want an intro to anarchism, what do you suggest? The only reason I don't suggest Anarcho-Syndicalism every time is because the rest of the book really is about Anarcho-Syndicalism. The first chapter is a phenomenal introduction to anarchism, period, but the rest of it is really a little more narrowly about anarcho-syndicalism. But I've thought about creating the first chapter into like a pamphlet and then distributing the pamphlet of chapter 1 because it's such a good intro. Highly recommend that. If anybody is watching and you're just looking for some really great introduction to anarchism and you don't want to read like a whole book, read chapter 1 of Rudolf Rocker's Anarcho-Syndicalism Theory and Practice. Sophia Eris Bauhaus says, question, as an anarcho-communist, who do you feel ideologically closer to? Other kinds of anarchisms like left market anarchists or communists like Marxists? I think that's like really situational. If you mean communists like Marxists, like actual Marxists, like Marxist autonomists or libertarian Marxists, or Marxist humanists, I'm pretty close to those people. However, if you mean like authoritarian leftists, like state socialists, like Leninists and Maoists and stuff, no. In fact, I actually consider those people to be deterrents to successful revolutionary activity. I think that they are doing extraordinary damage to our ability to carry out a revolution. I've even suggested that they are one of the main impediments to carrying out a successful revolution because they're trying to get us to do things that have already failed so miserably. But you can watch other videos on that topic. As for like market anarchism is relatively inoffensive to me. I don't necessarily agree with everything they have to say. Part of what I don't like about market anarchism is that they tend to see the market as the end goal. They don't actually want to transition away from the market at some point, and I disagree with that. But I think that some form of market anarchism might end up being part of this sort of transitionary system insofar as that we still exist within a capitalist world system. Free Palestine indeed, my friend. Yama says, what do you think of revolutionary hackers? Seems like a good idea. Obviously, try to make that meaningful. Don't make it performative. But yes, hacking seems like a very useful skill for revolutionaries. What do you think of having children? Have them if you like. Antinatalism. I think it's silly to go either way. I don't think you should be pro-natalist or anti-natalist. I think that people should just make the decision about whether they want to have children, and then they should take care of them. If they don't want to have children, they shouldn't. And if they do, they should. And once again, insofar as they can take care of them. I'll get moving a little faster, as I always say, but... Do you think anarchists or any left-wing movement will ever achieve any significant change to the system? And if not, do you think they will ever be able to make ordinary people's lives better? Yes, I think that, I should say, do I think they will? I don't know. I don't predict the future. On this topic, I would watch the video Hope. The video is about trying not to pretend we have a crystal ball, that we know what will or will not happen in the future. Oh, we will succeed. Revolution is inevitable. Or no, we'll never succeed. It's impossible. And, just focus your mind on the present. I think both optimism and pessimism are naive. I think that all we can do is ask ourselves what it is we want to achieve and what things can be done in the interim to achieve that goal. And then set our minds to doing the things that are necessary to achieve that goal. That's my position, and that's the ideas that are laid out in Hope. Curran says, hey, Anark, I discovered your channel recently and have been going through all your videos. Thank you for everything you're doing. Absolutely. I'm really glad that you're enjoying the content. Catboy Nestor Machno says, I really like your more niche videos. I hope you'll continue to make them. You'll have to tell me which kind you're talking about. You mean the video essays, or do you just mean the Anark Abridged that are on weird topics? I see lots of people congratulating for 20K. Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Got some repetition of questions here. Kinshin says, what should be the libertarian communist approach to the self-determination of Palestinians and the abolition of the Zionist ethno-state of Israel? Well, we have to kind of live in reality, even though it would be good if there was a very large libcom or anarchist movement in Palestine. There isn't. And therefore, what we should really be doing is just supporting people's right to self-determination, their right to self-defense from being genocided by Israel. And that is going to mean that that doesn't mean that we have to support every entity that is part of this process, but the Palestinian people do not deserve to be genocided. They do deserve to defend themselves. I think that the key for anarchists and libertarian socialists of all kinds is to always remember that we're supporting the people. We're not supporting their representative power structures, because those representative power structures rarely actually represent them. You know, Hamas is a great example. Hamas, there hasn't been elections in Palestine for like over a decade at this point. There are people who are alive, many people who are alive, who they've not even witnessed another election. So the idea that the government of Palestine is in some way like actually representative of the desires of the people is silly. However, Hamas is currently carrying out the defensive campaign against Israel because the Palestinian people are carrying out a defensive campaign against Israel. Israel is trying to exterminate the Palestinian people and take that land. They're really just doing the same thing the United States did with the Native Americans. You know, pretty much just straightforward in that sense. You can even look at the maps of the enclosure of all of that land over time, and you'll just see it follows the exact same pattern. They're separating them into smaller and smaller territories, and they're splitting the territories up into smaller and smaller pieces. Same thing. So, you know, and the same thing in Native Americans. There were tribes that were very hierarchical and were not necessarily good for their people, yet I'm not going to say, you know, those tribes shouldn't have rebelled just because they were hierarchical. Yeah, they should rebel. You know, like, it doesn't matter that they're hierarchical or not. You should resist being exterminated, right? Anaki, he says, we had a very prominent Maori Maoist here, but after he spent some time in an anarchist commune in Christchurch, he helped kick off an albeit small anarchist movement here in the Mana Matuhake movement. That's awesome. Didn't know that. Oh, Andre says, I meant co-ops in videos with other YouTubers. Sorry for not being specific. By the way, I'm new here. Learned about anarchism from Re-Education. I'm currently in the process of doing a cooperative video, and that will release probably in the next month or so. Thoughts on council communism and Rosa Luxemburg. Council communism seems like they accidentally did anarcho-syndicalism, but they didn't know that they accidentally did anarcho-syndicalism. In fact, it's kind of funny because I've actually had conversations with council communists where I'm like, discern this from anarcho-syndicalism for me. And then they try to discern it from anarcho-syndicalism, but they don't know enough about anarcho-syndicalism. So all they do is they just describe anarcho-syndicalism. And I'm like, cool, those are all features of anarcho-syndicalism. And they're like, no, they're not. And I'm like, yeah, they are. Just go start read about anarcho-syndicalism. And that's really all it comes down to. They can never really discern some key difference between anarcho-syndicalism and council communism. They're extremely minor anywhere that I've had anybody actually offer those differences. Very, very, very minor. It's basically anarcho-syndicalism, but with a Marxist foundation instead. So One On asks, question, how could a popular militia get to defend a free territory against professional soldiers and modern weapon systems, it would have to develop confederations of militias that coordinate together and develop their own soldiers and weapon systems. You know, it's not like it's not going to be magic. You know, we have to fight a war. So that's just you're going to have to do it, but you're going to have to do it from the bottom up by combining militias together and coordinating them. Kat Fain, did you know Alcoholics Anonymous founder Bill Wilson was a theory reading anarchist? No, I actually didn't, but numerous times I've been interested in the framework of Alcoholics Anonymous. People have talked to me about it, and some of it actually seems like it would be really useful as a therapeutic service for people within the movement, just not about alcoholism. You know, it'd be good if it could deal with people's traumas and conflicts between people. But yeah, no, that's interesting. I like the video essays. Don't become a vaguely leftist react channel. Yeah, well, no worries. I'm not probably going to be doing that. Tofu Test says, I found your debate with, I think it was SDL a while ago, useful as a baby lefty unfamiliar with anarchism because I had a lot of, but what about if thoughts. Helps that you two weren't screaming too. Yeah, I thought that was a really productive debate. That's another example how it's like, in certain occasions, I might do one of these things, a react or a debate. They're just not going to be what the channel's about. So the reason I did the one with Socialism Done Left is because honestly, he was a very good faith interlocutor. You know, we had a very calm, level-headed conversation. There was no attacking. There was no gotchas. It was just a good debate. Marcos Giovanni says, I would like to know your position about anarchist unity with ANCOMs, mutualists, etc. Please, I think it's a common doubt for people. I support libertarian left or, unity across the board. Marxist autonomists, neo-Zapatismo, mutualism, anarcho-communism, anarchism without adjectives, individualist anarchism, all of those different strains have a common interest and can work together and should work together. Their methods in the interim will differ to some degree, but they are mostly very commensurate. And insofar as that we utilize confederations, people can try their praxis without imposing it on others. And we can just come to agreements about how we coordinate. That's not the same for coordinating with authoritarian leftists. Authoritarian leftists want the opposite of what anarchists and libertarian socialists of a variety of different kinds want. They want to create a hierarchical system in the here and now and hope that one day it will just magically dissolve itself. People that are libertarian socialists of a variety of different kinds, at least they all recognize that's not what we're supposed to do. In one way or another, we're supposed to create horizontal power structures, and then those horizontal power structures work together. They create a unity in their diversity. They are complementary to one another, and that makes us powerful. So I fully support that. Yeah, that's my position. Sim Not Sam says, what common misconception of anarchism is the most annoying in your view? That anarchism means no organization, no rules, no structure. And to be fair, a lot of individualist anarchists in the 90s and stuff, they kind of assisted people with this smear campaign because I don't know if they wrongly thought that that was the case, but that's not the position of the majority of anarchists for the history of anarchism. The majority of anarchism has been what you would call organizationalist anarchism or social anarchism. It really was not until, the late 1900s, especially I would say the 1960s to the ending and maybe about the early 2000s, that individualist anarchism, this idea of anti-structural, anti-organizationalist anarchism became so popular. And that's not the majority of the history of the movement. The vast majority of all theory written about anarchism has been organizationalist anarchism, has been social anarchism, has been about coordinating and creating horizontal power structures. It's admirable that you stay so calm in your criticism. Couldn't do it myself. Yeah. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I tried to do so. I think it's really important to stay calm when you're criticizing someone. It's even if you're right, but you're kind of like freaking out, people are going to have a tendency to interpret that freaking out as you being wrong. You know, that oh, you're reasoning from emotion, not from rationality. Furthermore, I think that the more confident you become in your viewpoint, the more that you've heard all of the opposing arguments, you'll have less of a likelihood to you know, for your emotions to get up, because you have calm assurance. You know that, oh, okay, I know where this is going, and my response is this. And once you've heard all those arguments to the end, you've already heard the entire dialogue tree, and you've just heard the dialogue tree like 100 times. You're not really afraid of what's going to happen in the dialogue tree anymore. You're just kind of like, oh yeah, you're going to say this, and then you're going to say this, and then I'll say this in response, and then you'll say that in response. And what I found is you don't have a response when I say X. And, yeah, I found that doing that, seeing that dialogue tree play out is really important to maintaining that sense of calm. So, you know, part of the reason I was able to stay calm with that Second Thought video is because Second Thought didn't really say anything new. In fact, I would say Second Thought only really proceeded through about 10% of the dialogue tree. You know, it really goes quite a bit further than that. And if you want to see me debunk the rest of the dialogue tree, that's what the videos, The State is Counter-Revolutionary, is all about. I produced those after arguing with authoritarian leftists for like several years in a row. And I synthesized all of their arguments together, and then I synthesized all of the rebuttals together. Thoughts on dual power and whether or not it intersects with a specifismo. Dual power is prefiguration. It is building power from the bottom up, and therefore every anarchist believes in dual power. There are anarchists that don't like this phrase dual power, but that's just because a lot of them are sort of like anarchist conservatives. They don't want to see the phraseology change and develop. But dual power is just prefiguration. It's building power from the bottom up. So a specifismo utilizes the construction of dual power. Ryan says, congrats on 20K. I've seen other creators basically equate authoritarian leftism. Oop, the chat refreshed. Fantastic. Great. Looking good. Let's see if I can find it again. Yeah. Oh, equate authoritarian leftism with fascism. And I've gotten the impression that you disagree with that idea. Can you expand on that if so? No, I do not think authoritarian leftism is fascism. Because for me, leftism and rightism are about approaches to economic issues. So leftism is about labor militancy, the attempt to socialize the means of production, whereas the right wing is about monopolization and concentration into private entities. And what we see is that fascists tend towards the right on that. They tend towards the creation of private industries, which are just under the thumb of the fascist government. Furthermore, insofar as we're talking about left and right, on the left, there is less of this ethno-nationalist impulse. Now, I'm not going to say that it's not present at all. In modern day China, for example, there's clearly some Han supremacy. And in Russia, there were certainly some ethnic cleansing campaigns that took place. However, it was not the driving impulse of any of those projects. What actually drove all of those projects was some form of labor militancy. So whereas the Nazis really didn't care much about the economy except for, you know, just holding it together on fucking bubblegum and shoestrings long enough to get things together so they could go do imperial expansion, Russia was much more focused on developing an economy wherein they had concentrated the means of production within the state. And even though that didn't last, they had tons of private industry very, very quickly after their revolution. But I think that there are some key differences. That being said, I totally understand how people are drawing comparisons. I mean, you know, authoritarian leftists utilize what is called state capitalism, which is where the state becomes the new capitalist. They absorb the means of production instead of the people. They pay out wages. They do commodity production, all of that. And that is, in some ways, what fascists do in certain occasions. They will absorb some amount of corporations, but they tend towards wanting to develop the private industry. However, there's that classic understanding of fascism as being the collusion between corporation and state. So with that understanding in mind, I can see how people would think of authoritarian leftism as being fascism, but I do not personally see it that way. I see fascism as being an explicitly anti-socialist, anti-communist ideology. So, yeah, it's against labor militancy. It's against unionization and all of that. What's your opinion on participating in electoral politics? Don't do it. It's a waste of your time. If you want to vote, vote, but do not waste your time on a campaign. Do not waste your time door knocking. Do not waste your time doing phone banking for candidates. Nothing is going to change when they are elected. You could use that time on so many better things. So many better things. It is a complete sap of our energy. Let the liberals deal with all of that. Let the SOCDEMs waste their time with that. Those of us who have a revolutionary ideology should be focusing our time on building robust horizontal power structures, developing networks of mutual aid, developing cooperatives, developing militias and defense organizations, developing intelligence, and so on. So, yeah, I think that voting is whatever. It doesn't take very much time. But actually being part of an electoral campaign, I discourage that. Desi Anark, congratulations on the 20K subscribers. Thank you. I've seen a few of you congratulating the 20K. I appreciate it. Have you done anything on the systemic suppression of anarchists, such as the Anarchist Exclusion Act, or Sacco and Vanzetti, or Pinelli? I have not. Stuff is interesting, though. Do you feel like a lot of capitalist critiques of state socialist projects are actually valid, contrary to how MLs present it? That's the feeling I'm getting from the state. To some degree, but the thing I kind of hate about the way capitalists critique state socialist projects is almost everything that they think is bad about state socialism is like present within their own systems. And, okay, what's bad about state socialism? Hierarchical power. It's about centralization of power. It's about alienating the masses from control. But capitalist systems do that too. Regular traditional capitalist systems do that too. They think because corporations get to create hierarchical power, that's better. That's a bottom-up impulse. It's not a bottom-up impulse. It's just a bunch of petty fucking emperors, ruling over the people instead of just, one big emperor. Their system is garbage, just like the authoritarian leftism produces garbage systems. And that's because hierarchical power structures are abusive to the people. They're alienating of their power, and there's no way to change that. That's a structural reality. That's not a moral fact. Will you do a video criticizing synthesism, since it seems to be more opposite of the platformism of specificism? No. But if you want to see my opinions on that, I recommend part 2 of A Modern Anarchism. Sean says, any thoughts on library socialism? The Seriously Wrong podcast has done some good videos on it. I actually really like library socialism as a concept. In fact, it kind of just approaches being communism. And I love the Seriously Wrong podcast. If any of you are here and you are just being introduced to like libertarian socialism or libertarian communism or, anarchism or whatever, and that's starting to pique your interest, go listen to the Seriously Wrong podcast. And if you want to get a start, I did an episode on there. Go listen to the Seriously Wrong one where I'm on there. Just look up Seriously Wrong. It's SRSLY and then Anark, and you'll find it. It's on my channel. It's on theirs. It's great. They're hilarious, but they're also very, very insightful. Andrea, what YouTuber are you talking about here? Michael Brady says, how would economic planning work in the absence of a state? I'm not going to go into extensive depth here, but I think a great place to look, just to kind of get a start in understanding, would be reading about Participatory Economics by Albert and Hahnel. You might find it as Parecon, Parecon. That would be a great way to do things. It's essentially decentralized economic planning. It's not the only answer, but at least it gives you a good starting point to kind of understand, this is what the paradigm might look like. Even if you don't agree with every specific thing, it's a great framework for thinking. Andre Cesarini, congrats from Brazil. Freedom and Anarchy. Nice. Love hearing from Brazil. So as far as I know, Rojava functions as a multi-party democracy, which includes more social democratic and some traditionalist parties that are not explicitly socialist. Rojava also has a significant degree of private property and commodity production. Agreed. The first part I think is fine. I don't think that you should purge the opposing parties, but it's definitely true that they have a lot of private property. And one thing I will say to their credit is that they are carrying out the most rapid cooperativization of the economy of any planet of any nation on the planet right now. They are building cooperatives very, very fast, and they have created economic incentives to take private corporations and turn them into cooperatives. So that's happening really fast. But I think it still only ends up being like 3% of their economy. That's a lot. It's a lot of your economy to be cooperatives. But yeah, there's still quite a bit of private industry there. Definitely production for commodities. That stuff's still taking place. It's not really, in some ways, it's very social democratic, but there's still a lot of bottom up control in Rojava. And I think that's why a lot of libertarian socialists and anarchists look to Rojava, and it's noteworthy to them. And here we have the same question as earlier. What do you think about your response to Second Thought having more views than most of your videos? It's great for the channel, but it's sad for Daniel. A Modern Anarchism Part 3 took 10 months to produce, and I think it only has like 7,000 views. And the Second Thought video has over 30,000 views. A Modern Anarchism Part 3 has been out for months, and it got to 7,000. And the Second Thought video has been out for like a week, and it's at 30,000. Go watch A Modern Anarchism Part 3, please. Yeah, isn't Alcoholics Anonymous heavily based on the belief in God? Yeah, seems like it, but they're actually really vague with what they expect you to say about what God is. Like, you can just be like, oh, it's just like the universe is God. And they're like, cool, good enough. But I think it depends on which one you're in. Certain ones would expect a more like Christian interpretation, which I would say is kind of bad to be forcing people to take on this one narrow conception. Bill Wilson wrote a letter and referred to Bakunin as the sweet Russian prince. The whole organization is based on anarchist principles. Yeah, I can actually see that, even though I didn't know that beforehand. I can see how that would be the case. It's very bottom up in the sense that it's the therapy by community, you know. Turk says, I'm new to left-wing ideologies and I'm a bit confused. Do anarchists accept dialectical and historical materialism? Well, those two phrases are extremely nebulous. Like, what is meant by them is extremely nebulous. I've done enough study to know what they should mean, which is to say what dialectics is, what historical materialism is, and so on. So the answer to the question would be by the actual meaning of those words, many anarchists are, yes. However, anarchists take a more complex understanding of the historical materialism portion. So dialectics is like famously very hard to describe. And part of me thinks that's because it's a little bit nebulous at its core. But the idea is, you have a variety of things that are reciprocally determining one another. Within them, there is a diversity of different expressions of themselves. And all of those different diversities of expressions are being reciprocally determined in a sort of cyclical sense. Sometimes we might call it in philosophy a process ontology. And many anarchists might actually agree to this kind of conception, and some anarchists might not. However, and then, of course, the materialism part, right? You got like dialectical materialism. What's that about? Well, the idea is that, Hegel would have said that the dialectic is between like ideas and existence, right? So like ideas impose onto existence, and then existence produces new ideas and so on. But Marx and the dialectical materialists flipped that on its head. So they said, no, it's material reality which determines the structures of ideas, and then ideas determine material reality. So this is what they meant when they said they have turned Hegel on his head. And insofar as that's the case, I would say a lot of anarchists probably do think in that way. As far as the historical materialism part, I've always found it very odd that it's called historical materialism, because it really just seems like it's more like economic reductionism. What they're saying is that history has always played out as the conflict of economic classes. And, the history of all conflict has been economic conflict, has been class warfare, essentially. And there's some truth to that. But I think the main mistake is that it's not an intersectional understanding. And anarchists have historically had a much more intersectional understanding. This is the reason why the anarchists don't just ignore the state, whereas historical materialists tend to ignore the importance of the state and just focus their minds entirely on the way that the means of production are configured. So I think you can see this is probably kind of like a complex question, and it has a complex answer. But that being said, you're still going to find lots of people who are anarchists who continue to have an explicitly dialectical conception, and to some degree, even a historical materialist perception. So if you're looking for a dialectical thinker, you could go read Murray Bookchin. Murray Bookchin believes in what is called dialectical naturalism. But if you're looking for some kind of more open refutation of dialectics, you could read Kropotkin when he writes in Science and Anarchy. He thinks that the dialectic is itself kind of idealist, and he focuses instead on the scientific method. He says the scientific method is what actually works. It's what got us science, whereas the dialectic is a philosophical precept. So he sort of rejects dialectics as being this sort of abstraction and says we should be scientists instead. And if you want a sort of refutation of historical materialism, you can go read The Very Beginning of Nationalism and Culture by Rudolf Rocker. So it's diverse. Some kind of agree, some don't agree. There are objections here and there, and sometimes there's overlap, whether they intend it or not. So, that's the question. That's the answer to your question. It's kind of a complicated question, a complicated answer. Have you read Bernie Sanders' new book? No. I don't really, my mind is so focused on reading things for the videos that I don't really have any time for reading off the beaten path, Right now I'm reading Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb and Many Voices, One Song, which is by a few of the people who created the concept of sociocracy. So those are research I'm currently doing for part 4 of A Modern Anarchism. Which go prepare yourself for that release by watching parts 1, 2, and 3. Oh my God, I'm so far behind. AA is based in the belief that we are not the gods of the universe. The Christian bent was a product of the times. Also, discounting organizations based on God discounts all liberation theology. I'm not discounting them based on God. I'm saying that it's bad for an organization to require your liberation to be tied to you believing in God. I think that's coercive. And it's not good because we're going to have lots of people of all kinds of different beliefs involved in a movement. And if the only way that the movement gets to take place, the only way that we get liberation is by believing in one group's particular God, that's going to be dangerous. That's going to create a homogenizing effect, which will be oppressive to people that have a diversity of beliefs. So I actually think that that's my main criticism of AA in a general sense. But I think that when they have a more open conception of that, and their God, the conception of God can be almost anything, it's less harmful. But I still think the fact that it requires some conception of God in order to participate is actually a bad thing for AA. And it's the reason why a lot of alternative programs have been created. If Alcoholics Anonymous had just not included that aspect, I think that Alcoholics Anonymous both would have been more successful and more widespread. We would not see in the alternative organizations being created. That was really the only part that I think was badly considered when I read about Alcoholics Anonymous. Sam says, to be fair, Lenin State did wither away when the USSR voted itself out of existence in 1991. Checkmate, Anark. Oh, true. Yeah, accurate. Let's see. You are given the task of writing an anarchist as an antagonist. How would you write it without making them cartoonish evil or they went too far with their methods? Personally, I wouldn't write an anarchist as an antagonist. I would really only ever write anarchists as protagonists. Yeah, I wouldn't want to produce more fiction that enforces the idea that anarchists are dangerous and are trying to destroy society and so on. I think we got enough of that personally. Game Talk Time says, if an anarchist party won an election, what would be the most realistic first steps to ending hierarchical structures? I just want to say that I don't think you can. From inside the system, you cannot end the system. I just think that that's a fundamentally flawed conception. But if I were to just wildly, ideate here, it would probably be starting by devolving power into council structures at the bottom of society. Just make it to where every single neighborhood has a council structure, which is confederated into municipal council structures, which are federated, and that those actually are able to pass laws and regulations that instead bear upwards, not vice versa. But that would require probably passing a new constitution. So you would need to write a new constitution. And the new constitution would have to be completely the opposite of what currently is. Very unlikely that would ever happen. In fact, I would say pretty much close to impossible. A slower way, try to create a ton of cooperatives, try to create more citizen planning. I don't know. I just personally think that's never going to be the method that will take place. And there's a reason why it has no history of taking place. Cynthia says, what do you think about Hassan Piker? He's spreading ML propaganda on a disturbing level. I'm afraid we could see dangerous rise of ML organizations. The thing about Hassan is Hassan very rarely says anything that is a super concrete political position. He kind of abstractly supports Lenin, abstractly supports state capitalism. I have never seen him actually say anything super concrete. I don't think he's convincing very many people to be authoritarian leftists. I think almost everybody watches him as a sort of, lovable himbo. I hope he doesn't take offense to that, but that's kind of what it boils down to. I don't think people are going to Hassan for their political analysis. They just kind of like Hassan's personality and his reaction to events. But I don't think anybody's under the impression that Hassan is going to give them a fully fledged political ideology. Jamil says, what about union organizing? Union organizing is good. That's about it. But try to build horizontal unions. Don't build hierarchical unions. They've been seen to be a failure point many times, not only during a revolutionary juncture, but just in the arc of a normal liberal society. Hierarchical unions are much more likely to cooperate with your enemies and to just become an HR department for your corporation. How would video games like Fortnite work in an Anark? It would be a video game and people would play it. I don't know. It's these sort of questions, I think, expect that, this would just be completely different somehow. But it's like, it would be however people wanted it to be. People would just create the product from the bottom up. So if they wanted to make something like Fortnite, they'd make something like Fortnite. If they wanted to play something like that, they'd play something like that. Any reason why you don't subscribe to the egalitarianism hierarchy left-right distinction? Because I think it's mostly just something that was defined for convenience. I think it was a way for people to create a gotcha against authoritarians to try to define them out of the theoretical grouping. But I think that it's kind of a little bit ahistorical. It doesn't really match the usage of the word left for the last 100 years. Yeah, it kind of seems like it's like related to post-leftist rhetoric, and I don't really agree with that conception. If you want words for egalitarianism and hierarchy, you've got it. Egalitarianism, hierarchy. Libertarianism, authoritarianism. Those words already work. We don't need left, right to also refer to that. And I got to say, in a general sense, it really just never has referred to that. So I think that that's why I don't agree. Jim Goose says, is the rehabilitative justice system in AANES antithetical to libertarian socialism, or is it an understandable practical policy? Now, I don't know what it looks like today, but the last time I was studying it was sometime in, I think, 2016, 2017. And at that time, I think it was a good thing. It seemed like it was actually functioning relatively well. And the largest number of people who were imprisoned were people in ISIS, who you can just be considered prisoners of war. So I don't think that was really a negative process. And my understanding is that it was very bottom up, that their community defense was rotated as people in the community, and that it was very successful, and that rates of crime are relatively low, and rates of imprisonment are pretty low, except for, once again, prisoners of war. But I haven't researched it for several years now, so I would have to go back and see where it's at now. Would you do a response video to Hakeem's What is a Tanky? No, I'm not going to get into doing more response videos. Would you rather ally with the authoritarian left or the libertarian right? Neither. I would never ally with either. The authoritarian left will just sabotage you. The only way I would ever ally with the authoritarian left is if they decided that they would do what libertarian socialists wanted instead. Like, we create our organizations and they decide to work within them and they don't try to undermine them, then maybe. But even then, at the small scale, I do not recommend that. They will try to destroy your organization. They will try to co-opt it. They will try to introduce hierarchical power. It's guaranteed. I've just never seen any exceptions. It always happens that way. Now, once you've got to a huge size and libertarian socialism and horizontalism has become the default, then pluralism might be an acceptable thing, because then at that point, what are they going to really do? The hegemonic system is horizontal. So at that point, sure. Libertarian rightists are essentially fascists, not literally fascists, but my God, they're always in the same spaces with them. You'll notice. They are constantly rubbing shoulders with fascists, and many of them, if they deconvert from libertarian right wing ideology, they almost never go libertarian left wing. They go authoritarian right wing afterwards. And that's because I think most of them only believe in that ideology, not because of freedom or any of that. They believe in hierarchy. They like the survival of the fittest mentality of libertarian right ideology. And there's just no way to pair that with leftism. Right-wingers think we're just shouty libs. They don't realize we're heavy bookworms and nerds. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. What do you think of communization? What I've read about it, it seems like another place where where these people have accidentally discovered anarchism, and they don't know that they're discovering anarchism, which is fine. Once again, they're basically ancoms as far as I can see. They're just like Marxist ancoms, which isn't bad. Once again, I've said I'm down with all that. However, people arrive at these ideas of horizontal power, bottom up power structures. I think it's fine. I don't care. I don't care what it's called. I want our revolution to succeed. And for our revolution to succeed, we have to build things from the bottom up. We have to build horizontal power structures. So whatever you want to call it, communization theory, neo-Zapatismo, democratic confederalism, council communism, anarchism, libertarian Marxism, Marxist autonomism. I don't care what it's called. Just do it. Just do it the way that works, which is to say the way that the people are actually empowered. And you have my support. You're my ally as far as I'm concerned. This is why anarchists support neo-Zapatismo so much, because we don't care what it's called. We just care about what it is. Michael says, just want to say thank you for all your work. Your synthesis of theory has helped a lot in my community organizing efforts. I'm very glad to hear that. That is definitely the sort of thing I intend to do with my work. So yeah, I appreciate it. Lucky Black Cat also has a great video on the way economy could work in an anarchist society. Yes. Yeah. Lucky Black Cat's a great channel. You should all go subscribe to her. In your opinion, what can we do to counter the increasing right-wing authoritarianism in Europe? You know, you might notice there's some sort of repetition here, but the answer to pretty much all the questions is we have to begin building these horizontal organizations. You know, I think it's really important for people to understand that the horizontal power structure itself, the organizations, are step number one. They're the building block for everything else. You know, just doing a targeted tactics go away. What we need is strategies. And strategy requires long-term thinking, which means that we need to start by creating the minimum structures that are going to build into the bigger structures. Everything relies on that. Otherwise, we're just going to get stuck in an eternal cycle of responding and reacting instead of being proactive and building something that is an actual threat to the power structures. You want to threaten authoritarian right-wingers? Stop just focusing on reaction. Focus instead on building something that is a threat to them so that they can be effectively suppressed. Jim Goose says, it's my understanding that Rojava is doing something similar to Makhno-Shavina and Revolutionary Catalonia, which allowed small owners in the early days but promoted cooperativization. Yeah, but I don't want to compare because truthfully, both the Free Territories of Ukraine and Revolutionary Catalonia, the private owners were a small percent of the population of the economy. It's like the reverse percentage. They were like 5%, 3% or something. Private owners was like a single digit percent of their total economy. It was almost all collectivized and cooperativized. So yeah, it almost seems like I mean, we'll see how it goes. But I do think that's been one of the things that Rojava hasn't been doing quite right. I think they should be pushing cooperativization quite a bit harder and collectivization quite a bit harder. But I'm glad that they have not been nationalizing a huge number of things because that would lead to state capitalism. Did you know that Alex Jones buys his Patriot blend coffee beans from Easy LN? Isn't that funny? I fucking love that. That's hilarious. Yeah, that's good shit right there. It's good for the Easy LN. They need the money. By the way, everybody who's watching right now, if you want really good coffee, You should buy the EZLN's coffee. The Zapatistas, their main export is coffee beans. Okay, so go buy Zapatista coffee. It helps them. The only reason I don't drink it is because it's not caffeinated enough, and I'm a stimulant fiend. How should leftists deal with infighting? It seems that leftists will very vocally disagree about anything and everything. I think that's the reason why right-wing extremism breeds so rapidly, is because they will ally with a huge portion of the political spectrum. I think, first of all, I don't agree with the concept of leftist infighting if what we're talking about is libertarian socialists and authoritarian leftists fighting. That's not infighting because we're not allies. They want something very different from us. They're trying to build structures which are very different from ours. In a real way, everything they're trying to do sabotages what anarchists and libertarian socialists are trying to do. We can't actually cooperate. Like, our methods negate the other one's method. Anarchists and libertarian socialists, if they're successful, it negates the authoritarian left method. If authoritarian leftists are successful, it negates the anarchist or libertarian socialist method. So there's no way for us to ally. That's not a real concept, and it never has been historically. That's why if anarchists ever did sort of like ally with authoritarian leftists for some period of time, eventually the anarchists were just sabotaged, destroyed, imprisoned, etc. This isn't some like, historical happenstance, like, oh, it'll go different next time. It's always going to be this way because the methods themselves are perfectly antithetical to one another. Another thing I should say is that the right wing does do a ton of infighting. The difference between the left wing and the right wing is that the right wing's infighting is in private. They don't make it public. In public, they present a sort of united front. They like make it look like they all agree and cooperate. But internally, no. Internally, they're getting into fights all the time. There's tons of drama. They're splitting all the time. That's the reason why you're hearing about new organizations of theirs made all the time. And their fighting is often violent. Like, they are actually hurting one another, getting into physical fights, getting to like sleeping with each other's wives and all kinds of these little scandals. They just don't make it public. The only way you know about it is if you're like paying attention to anti-fascist researchers that are paying attention to their infighting. They're not allying with a lot of different parts of the spectrum. They're trying to manipulate large parts of the spectrum. So they're always creating these pipelines. And that part, I think, is probably somewhat effective. Creating these pipelines, they pretend to be someone else in public, and then they create a pipeline to their ideology. But yeah, so I think that leads us to a much bigger topic, but I just wanted to make those comments there. Thoughts on spirituality and religion and socialist anarchists who are of that inclination? I would say your spirituality and religion is your own. You determine what it is that you believe. Personally, I am an atheist, and I do not believe there is anything supernatural in the entire universe. I believe the universe is entirely a physical construct, period, end of story. But I'm not going to enforce that on you. In order for us to build a movement that has diversity and which can achieve complementarity, we have to allow difference to take place. Insofar as your religious and spiritual beliefs do not cause you to believe that natural hierarchies must exist, and that we must subject ourselves to these natural hierarchies, then we can be allies. But that's the crux of it. If your religious ideology makes you believe that there must necessarily be hierarchical power structures, then no, we're not going to be able to organize together. It's just that simple. But that's your beliefs are your beliefs until they begin to tread on someone else. And insofar as they don't tread on someone else, those are your beliefs. We could have a conversation about it if you like, and I could express my reasoning for believing what I believe, but I just really don't think it should be our main focus right now. I don't think that it's a good use of our time. It's better for us to be building coalitions across a diversity of different religious and spiritual mentalities than it is for us to be getting into arguments about which one of us is right. Okay, I'm so far behind. Gosh, let me go up. There we go. Last stream, I asked for tips on creating anarchist media network in Russia. You said to write you on Twitter, but it's banned in Russia, not comfortable to use. And other way I can write to you. The truth is I assume you mean like a YouTube channel or something, in which case I would just say start a YouTube channel. But like, you could email me, I guess. You could email me at baryonpipeline@gmail.com. But yeah. Isn't arguing anarchy wouldn't work? You need a state to protect yourself. Pretty much saying communism is impossible because any dissent is grounds for state control. Yes, it absolutely is. In fact, I just made that comment on Twitter like yesterday. Like, if you think it's impossible to live without the state, you think communism is impossible. Communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society. So most anti-anarchist arguments are anti-communist arguments for that reason. For the record, I find that your modern anarchism series is one of the most valuable pieces of anarchist propaganda I have ever happened upon. I cannot recommend it enough to non-anarchists. Yes, I would like to emphasize a modern anarchism is probably the most important work on this channel. Like, if you are really trying to understand what anarchism is and how anarchism can function in the modern day, those videos are my most earnest attempt to create a modern synthesis of anarchism that is really truly able to function in the modern world. So like, if you are trying to move past this sort of like tertiary surface level understanding of politics, and you're trying to get into the nitty gritty of how things work, how the world works, how politics works, how power works, how we can actually transform society, those videos are that's where you want to go. If you're looking for something that may give you a little bit of an introduction before that series, you should watch my video, Power. But I'm glad you appreciate it. They take a lot of work. I put a lot of effort into them. What do you think about pirate politics, like the party from Europe? I don't know enough about it to say anything. Sim, not Sam. Daniel, have you ever read the email exchanges between Chomsky and Sam Harris about the morals of intentions? It was so funny to see Sam's empty worldview fall apart. Yeah, that was not a good look for Sam. I knew that I would love this channel simply based on your love for Rudolf Rocker's Nationalism and Culture. That is the book that cemented my place in the anarchist camp. Yeah, Nationalism and Culture is the book that made me forever an anarchist. Rudolf Rocker, that book is beautiful and heartbreaking and detailed and lays out the history of hierarchical power and demonstrates that it always works this way. It doesn't matter what era you're looking at. Like, this the distribution of power determines everything about how society functions. And it's always been that way and it will always be that way. And Nationalism and Culture really poured concrete on the foundations of my anarchism. So I think it is an incredibly important work. However, I would not recommend it as an introductory work. It is relatively dense. It's kind of intermediate at minimum, kind of advanced. But if you love history, I think you'll just take right to it. The Hunter... do you have any advice or resources with advice for what a single anarchist can do to encourage community unity and incorporation of anarchism within a rather divided community? I feel like I've answered this question a ton of different times, but I'm having a hard time knowing like a place where there's just a single resource that addresses just that question. I think maybe the video I did called like "What is to be done" might have some answers to that, but I've answered this kind of in a general sense on several of the Anark Abridged videos and on live stream numerous times. I don't really want to go over it again, but yeah. It's just complicated enough that it takes too much time to answer. So I'm going to keep moving here. Any thoughts about anarchist ideas of value theory? Yeah, I mean, one thing to say is that Marx's conception of value theory actually roots from Proudhon. Proudhon's value theory is very operative within Marx, and Proudhon was the first anarchist. Do you appreciate the irony of state capitalists describing us as utopian, even as their entire ideology requires the existence of the infallible human in order to function? Yeah. Moreover, it requires that an entity, which is its entire purpose is to maintain its complete domination over society, is at some point going to determine that it just doesn't need to exist anymore. It's just going to fade away. Naturally, it's just going to do that. Like magic. It's just going to poof into thin air. That is absolutely utopian thinking, like nonsensical. They have no reasoning as to believe that's the case. It's extremely vague anytime they produce reasoning. Well, the state is just there to enforce the relations between classes. And as soon as we can get rid of class distinctions, the state will just disappear. It's like, wow. And you call anarchists utopian. That's just shocking that anybody could believe something like that. Like, yeah, you know, the king is just going to abolish the throne. You know, no big deal. What are your thoughts on anti-society or nihilistic and post-left anarchist theory? I don't find it very persuasive. If you want to see my direct analysis of those sorts of ideas, you can find it in my video Hope, and you can find it especially in part 2 of A Modern Anarchism. Yeah, Cindy basically says my opinion. I don't see any need in dialectics. We have complex systems analysis, which is far better. Yes, agreed. Complex systems analysis is an actual scientific model for understanding reciprocal relations, feedback cycles, you know, how do complex systems function? How do things reciprocally determine one another? We actually have science on that now. We don't really need some vague philosophical conception like dialectics. We have complex systems analysis. So I think complex systems analysis has completely superseded dialectics as a process ontology because it actually has scientific backing. You can actually do experiments on it. That it is verified by all existing experiment. You know, it's a theory, whereas dialectics is just kind of a philosophy. Now, if you find value in dialectics, that's fine. I'm not shitting on you, but if you're looking for something that actually functions as a scientific tool, complex systems analysis is far superior. Anarcho-Clownarchist says, I have a question regarding your modern anarchism series. Should we expect a part 4 soon? Part 2 is especially impressive, and it gave me hope for true unity among libertarian socialists. Part 4, I am currently working on the script. I am going to try to be done with it by the end of the year. So, but that's just the script. So then after that, I have to do voiceover and visuals and music scoring. So expect it sometime probably early next year in the first few months of 2024. But the script is currently being worked on. And then that will be the last part. Would you say some anarchists have a conception of the world that is based on both idealism and materialism, and some are one or the other? I find it difficult to understand sometimes. I don't think I have met any idealist anarchists. This idealism, materialism split is like completely misunderstood in the modern era. When idealism and materialism were being used as words, it was during the time when there was German idealism. Okay, it doesn't mean just being like optimistic. Idealism is a philosophy which believes that ideas precede reality, that ideas and the structure of ideas determine how reality works. Okay? And materialism is the conception that all that exists is the material, and that material reality moving is what causes things to happen. I've never met an idealist that is a radical. The reason is because that is incredibly outdated. We are no longer in the 1800s. You know, they were talking about a philosophical, environment where there were actually unironic German idealists that believed that ideas were like these platonic ideals drifting outside of reality, determining how the material world functions. That's silly. And nobody believes that. Therefore, this accusation of anarchists being quote unquote idealists, nonsensical. Literally, it has no relevance to the conversation at all. So pretty much all of us are materialists. We believe material reality exists, and the movement of material reality is what determines how things take place. Personally, I've never met an anarchist that thinks otherwise. Margot says, how do you associate in leftist spaces with Marxist MLs and other leftists? I know they're different in ways, but if we generalize, what of other left ideology do you consider closer to anarchism or socialism? If they're just a Marxist, which is to say they just believe they agree with Marx and that's where they get their ideas, generally we get along. If they are anything afterwards, like Leninist or a Stalinist or a Maoist or whatever, we do not get along. And I do not associate with them in an organizational sense. And I do not advocate any organization I am part of associate with them. Their entire method, their entire praxis is co-option. So be extremely careful letting them anywhere near your organizations. There's a reason why that I say we should develop platform organizations that have platforms that explicitly include that we are horizontal. But insofar as just Marxists, there's all kinds of Marxists. I would say Marx himself was a libertarian socialist in many ways. And Marxist autonomists and people who are into communization theory and stuff like that. Those people tend to be very horizontal in their thinking. Would you say Bad Empanada is an ML? I know he associates with the NLs. I think he's like a Peronist or something. It's really weird. He's not explicit about his beliefs, but he's clearly an authoritarian leftist. Do you consider Marxism as a method to inherently be a subversion of the anarchist movements? No. Once again, I think the ideas of Marx are very influential and important. However, it's really more about Leninism and Maoism and other associated ideologies. Those are the ones that are very dangerous. I consider them a sort of bastardization of Marx. I don't think they are Marxist. Sometimes I'll put Marxist in quotations when I say Marxist-Leninist. Any plans to add to the Anark reading list? Probably not, but maybe one day. Thoughts on anarcho-nihilism? Watch the video Hope. Jake Slater says, you said earlier that you think that if someone deconverts from the libertarian right, that they will most likely go to the auth right. I'm the opposite. I used to be lib right, now I'm lib left. That's great. I'm happy to be wrong. I mean, I'd be very happy to be wrong. Unfortunately, I do think it's very common for people on the libertarian right to become authoritarian right. Insofar as that I get the vibe that actually they really do want human freedom and autonomy, and that they aren't just there for the survival of the fittest, social Darwinist silliness. I'll engage with them. But like, you can see right above here, a wolf who cried huff or whatever. Notice what he's saying here. A legal framework of private property is necessary considering human nature. So look, Like, this is the kind of argument I mean. You know, this idea that humans are necessarily hierarchical, that they want to exploit each other, that private property is the only way to maintain this because you don't want to fight against this natural hierarchical human urge. I mean, I'm interpreting this as somebody who's a libertarian right winger here. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is the kind of thing you'll see. And by the way, a wolf who cried hoof, just go watch my video, Human Nature. It pretty much just answers this. And then if you want to know more about structuring, you should go watch the video After the Revolution. Oh, yeah. And then here's confirmation. Yeah, he says there's one set, Human Nature, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so exactly. Just go watch Human Nature. Yeah, he continues on. This is exactly what I thought as we go on here. Human nature is adaptability. That's what humanity is. Humanity got here not by being rigidly hierarchical or by being rigidly horizontal, but not by being competitive, but instead by being cooperative. The only reason why humanity exists as it does is because we out-cooperated everything in nature. We are hyper cooperative. And part of that is because when you got a big brain, now you can build structures of community and coordination. And structures of community and coordination make you the most competitive thing. The more coordination and cooperation you have, the more you will outcompete everyone else. So human nature is actually adaptability. It's actually cooperation. It's actually the ability to understand the world and build communities. Communities are far more powerful than, lone wolves and, single hunters by themselves. Like, notice that lions haven't built a world-spanning society. Cheetahs are going extinct, right? We aren't a predator species. We are not a species based in domination. The impulse toward domination is actually what weakens us. It holds us back. It means that we can't cooperate as well. And that cooperation is what has allowed us to develop sophisticated knowledge and technology that we then pass around to one another. And therefore, we are all empowered through that cooperation and that trading of knowledge. Domination and competition leads to knowledge being cut off. It leads to lack of trust. Lack of trust leads to the inhibition of the flow of knowledge. Because if you don't trust other people, you don't want to let them know things. And if you don't want to let other people know things, then what we have is a society where fewer people now contain the knowledge and the advancements of technology and community. So we get a less powerful society. And the reason why that we have this very, very powerful society is because that impulse was minimally present. And we see that through the development of cooperative mechanisms and through the free flow of knowledge, that has led to all of the most major advancements in human history. Science doesn't exist through competition. Science exists through cooperation. And part of the reason why we went through the Enlightenment, we went through the scientific revolution, was because scientists were trading their results across all country boundaries. They were distributing knowledge freely, and that free distribution of knowledge led to an enormous explosion in human advancement. So this idea that we are naturally hierarchical species, that we are naturally competitive, is absolute nonsense that doesn't at all accord to the reality of our situation. Hierarchy is imposed on us by parasitic ruling classes. The ruling class wants to parasitize the benefits of cooperation among the masses. And insofar as the masses can cooperate, it hurts the parasitism of the rulers. So, no. Pretty much literally the exact refutation of everything you just said. Okay, let's catch up here. Earlier question about leftist infighting. I'm specifically referring to how we should combat lib-left infighting. Yeah, unfortunately, what I found about that is that on the lib-left, if you criticize one another, everybody has a little meltdown. Nobody is able to handle criticism. And I think that's partially because people on the libertarian left are so used to being on the attack all the time that they are completely caught off guard once they're on the defense. And I think that's unhealthy. Our culture needs to improve. People need to be able to handle criticism and critique without taking it personally. You need to understand that your ideas are not you. You are not your ideas. You are a human being, and your ideas can change, and you need to be open to the possibility they can change. And if you're not, you're never going to learn, and you're never going to develop. And that's one of the problems that a lot of people have. Now, I will say it's true across the board. People tend to be very defensive, very knee-jerky, very reactive. But I've noticed a lot of anarchists and libertarian socialists are very reactive and are not nearly as open to critique and discussion and healthy dispute, healthy conflict as they should be. That's a critique I have of people within our community, and it's something I've said numerous times. So I hope people take that into consideration. You need to be less reactive. You need to be a little more calm in listening to criticism, and you need to be able to respond a little more healthy to conflict. Healthy conflict takes place by the concerted action of attempting to find common ground, attempting to understand what the other person is saying, and rationally considering whether your arguments actually make sense without responding with emotional knee-jerk. And imposition of emotional knee-jerk onto rational discussion is a form of manipulation, and people need to stop doing it. I think it's extremely unhealthy, and it damages our communities, and also it's pretty bad optics, y'all. It just doesn't look good. Like, nobody from the outside is responding well to these knee-jerk emotive responses when you get criticized. That doesn't look good. It looks bad. People are more likely to lose respect for you when you do that, not gain respect. So these are all things that the community is going to have to learn in order for us to move forward. And unfortunately, people don't want to hear it, but I'll keep saying it no matter what. Let's go back. Okay, I think I'm starting to get there. Into the Agora, I mentioned the Marxists as subversive due to their acceptance of a transitionary state as praxis, as well as their lack of a coherent ethical critique of statism. Yeah, except for if you talk to like the Marxist autonomists and libertarian Marxists and all that, their conception of a transitionary state ends up sounding a lot like what the anarchists want to build. So it doesn't end up being that harmful because they basically just want to build horizontal organizations and they just want to call it a state. They just want to call it a worker state or whatever. So it kind of depends on which Marxists you talk to. What's your thoughts on Listen Marxist by Murray Bookchin and his point on organizing around the banality of life under capitalism rather than poverty and material immiseration? Listen Marxist is a good essay. I agree with most of it. It's very polemic. He has two polemic essays that are very notable. And both of them get some things wrong, but they're mostly correct. And that is, it's called Social Anarchism or Lifestyle Anarchism, an Unbridgeable Chasm. And the other one's called Listen Marxist. And I agree with 90% of what he says in both. But the 10% that I don't agree with, I can see why people get upset about it. It's a little bit of, those things can be some kind of misrepresentation or distortion. And yeah, but I agree with both of those essays broadly. I think that they're accurate. And Listen Marxist, to be fair, really doesn't apply necessarily to people who are like libertarian Marxists. But at the time he was saying that, there were not very many libertarian Marxists. And the same thing with Social Anarchism or Lifestyle Anarchism, Unbridgeable Chasm. He was referring to a movement which was largely lifestyle anarchists at the time. So, yeah, no, I think there's a lot of good points in that essay. Is there a good primer for starting to build these horizontal structures? I can talk to people and get them curious, but I don't know how to get something lasting started. Well, that's such a broad question. It's hard for me to even know where I would start telling you the answer to that. Maybe you could watch the video Constructing the Revolution. You could watch my video on especifismo, one of the earliest ones I did. You could watch the video called What is to be Done? Or, yeah. I mean, there's a few. I would say Constructing the Revolution is the one I usually instruct people towards. But I noticed that a lot of people, when they ask this question, they're really asking for like the nitty gritty. And the nitty gritty is like, you need to talk to people. You need to build an organization, then start getting people in the organization. You know, like that kind of nitty gritty is like hard for me to tell you. I need so many details. Are there organizations in your city? Are there not organizations in your city? Are there radicals? Are there no radicals? Are you in a rural area? Are you in an urban area? There's no one size fits all answer. So it's kind of hard to answer a question like that. So let's see here. What do you think of the Strong Towns movement? Never heard of it. Or rather, I think I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. How would military institutions be organized under an anarchist society? Confederations of militias. Once again, you can go watch like Constructing the Revolution. You can go watch After the Revolution. What do I think of post-civ anarchism? Most of the time, I'm a little annoyed with how they define civilization. Civilization almost just seems like synonymous with hierarchical power, which I disagree with. And then if you take their entire body of work to just be, oh, civilization means hierarchical power, then yeah, they're just anarchists. Like most post-civ critique just becomes anarchism, and it's not really unique in that sense. But there is this sort of blending between post-civ and anti-civ where there's like primitivism mixed in. And I'm against primitivism. I think that it's not only dangerous but wrong. It's just incorrect. Technology is not the problem. And I disagree with post-civ and anti-civ's people definition of civilization. I think that it's harmful to associate civilization with hierarchical power. I think that actually feeds into anti-indigenous narratives. But it's also, I think, just wrong. It's not the definition of civilization. But anyway, that's a very short answer. There's a lot more that could be said. Have you ever heard of Paul Matic? I've heard of Paul Matic, but I don't really know anything about him. I mentioned my answer to council communism earlier. What do you think about the criticism of decentralized planning being infinite meetings? No, it doesn't have to be infinite meetings, but it will involve more meetings. But that's because now the people are doing the administration of society. So that's to be expected. We should expect them to be doing less labor because labor will be more distributed, or less like physical menial labor, but more administrative labor. So things will just be different. And part of that will be that we'll have to have meetings about how things work. So that's not a bad thing. Those meetings are where we are empowered. That's where we get power. Power comes from decision making, and those meetings are where we make decisions. Riot Ready says, would rather have you on Mastodon and PeerTube or Submedia. I would not abandon YouTube because the whole purpose of YouTube is essentially a modern version of pamphleteering. So I'm not looking for places that have like perfect ethics. I'm looking for places that have big audience. The same reason why, you should hand out pamphlets to people in public, to normal people in public. Handing out pamphlets to other radicals is not very effective. Radicals are already radicalized. So I'm already on Mastodon though. PeerTube is fine. I'd be willing to mirror on PeerTube. Submedia, I don't think like hosts other people's work. I think they do. Their own work. But I'd be interested if they wanted to host my videos. I'd be down. They can just put them on Submedia as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, it's like pamphleteering. It's like take it and distribute it as you please, wherever you please. What do you think of the protesters like Extinction Rebellion or Letzte Generation in Germany that glue themselves in protest against climate inaction and block streets? I'm fine with it if it works. I'm not entirely convinced it does work, but at least brings attention. But attention only goes so far. Eventually people lose their taste for it. That's what I learned in Occupy. At first, getting that like attention from the media and utilizing the attention from the media is powerful. But it dries up. It goes away eventually. And then if your entire tactic was based on just getting attention and they stopped paying attention, then you gained nothing in the prospect. And that's why I think it's way more important to build organizations, not to just do direct action and protest. That's not to say, though, that their tactics don't have some value. Gaining attention is good. What do you think about anarcho-capitalism? It's not anarchism. Anarcho-capitalism is probably, in reality, a fantasy. It could probably never exist. But if it did exist, anarcho-capitalism would be sprawling company towns controlled by monopoly corporations that hired private militias in order to enforce their rule. That probably would only just create company scrip instead of money, because it would be easier to just keep all of the gains to themselves in their little walled company towns. And there would probably be prolific warfare between corporations, and corporations would probably create arbitration courts, which would function like kangaroo courts, which would only serve the interests of the corporations who had created and controlled them. And there would be only essentially any criminal law insofar as it protected monopoly corporations, because capitalism inherently leads to concentration of wealth, and it is based on the private ownership of property and no communalization, and therefore would just lead to essentially a form of neo-feudalism. I doubt it could last very long. I mean, that to me sounds so horrific and tyrannical that it would probably just destroy itself in short order. And very likely it would turn into something like monarchy if I had to bet. Probably they would eventually have to accept some sort of centralized state, because capitalism requires a state for enforcement. And the corporations would probably not want to do the task of managing those private militias, managing those arbitration courts. They'd probably prefer to outsource that labor to some sort of central entity, and therefore they'd probably just recreate the state in very short order. So anarcho-capitalism is both impractical, and insofar as it were to exist, it would probably be dystopian. It'd be a horror wasteland. It would also probably destroy the environment so fast that even the minor amount of breaks that we currently have would be destroyed. They'd just be gone. And we would have no more environment. They would essentially accelerate climate change. They would put no brakes on it, because corporations have no interests in preventing externalities. So yeah, anarcho-capitalism sounds horrible. I'm struggling with physics. Any advice on good learning material? Well, I guess it depends on what you're struggling with. But a lot of Physics 1 and Physics 2 stuff is on Khan Academy. It's probably a good place to go. Go to Khan Academy, see what you can get there. Just Google will often work. Google the concept that you're struggling with, or hire a tutor. Could be helpful. Speaking of a modern anarchism, do you have a textbook recommendation on complex systems analysis? I wanted to become more familiar with the math behind your theory. Yeah, the video cites like one of the main textbooks by the two guys named Mobus and Colton, and I think it's called Understanding Complex Systems. It has two different names, but I think one of them is on Understanding Complex Systems. That one was extraordinarily helpful for me, at least. So highly recommend. Also, it does include math. Quite a bit of math. I just didn't include any of that math in the videos because, thought that was probably going a little bit too dense. But the mathematics behind complex systems analysis is in that textbook. So highly recommend that. What's the substantive difference between libertarian socialism and anarcho-socialism? Is there a resource I can read to understand better? Libertarian socialism is the big grouping, and it contains anarchism, neo-zapatismo, libertarian Marxism, Marxist autonomism, etc. So libertarian socialism is the broad grouping, and then there's a bunch of kinds of libertarian socialist ideologies, and anarchism is just one of them. So I wouldn't say that those are two distinct traditions. I'd say that anarchism is a kind of libertarian socialism. What is your opinion of Michael Malice? He seems very silly and wrong most of the time. Michael Malice is an anarcho-capitalist entryist who is trying to pipeline anarchists to anarcho-capitalism. So he's basically trying to destroy. This is a very old tactic for ANCAPs and libertarians. And I mean capital L libertarians, not libertarian socialists. What they try to do is they try to steal our words like anarchism, anarcho-capitalism, and libertarianism. These words were both left-wing explicitly, but they love to try to work their way in and go, we're one of you. We're just like you guys. We're also anarchists. We're libertarians. But what they want is a new system of rulership. So Michael Malice, you can see this in the fact that he published a compilation of anarchist essays, and then he included anarcho-capitalists in the compilation, so that when you're reading through, you think that they're in the same tradition. So Michael Malice is harmful, and his only purpose is to deceive, confuse, and pipeline anarchists into anarcho-capitalism. From my understanding, Marx's value theory was mainstream at that time, which is the one reason he used it. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, both Marx and Proudhon were influenced by Ricardo, and Ricardo also held a labor theory of value. They were also influenced by Adam Smith, and Adam Smith also had a labor theory of value. So the labor theory of value was actually very common at that point in history. Ketsa, who you should go subscribe to Ketsa's channel, says, any thoughts on addressing and deconstructing the intergenerational disdain? A major force preventing the developing of collective memory is these generational wars. So I got to say, I do think that happily there is less of this intergenerational disdain between all of the generations after Gen X, basically. So I think the millennials and the Zoomers, even though the Zoomers definitely are constantly trying to dunk on millennials, I think that millennials mostly look at the Zoomers and they're like, oh yeah, that looks familiar. You remind me of myself when I was young, and I mostly still agree with everything you say. So yeah, we're pretty much allies. But the Zoomers really want to dunk on the millennials because of minor differences, but give it 10 years and they'll basically be millennials. Because the millennials went through a very similar series of pressures. Both the Zoomers and the millennials were pretty much born into a world in crisis. The millennials had this short period of time at the beginning of their life where there was not crisis. And I think that informs something about the millennial conception of the world. Whereas the Zoomers were just born straight into a world in chaos. There was never a period of time where they ever experienced any stability. And that also informs the way they look at the world. However, every generation that is being born now is being born into a world in chaos. And so I think what we're going to see is a lot more of this intergenerational solidarity as more and more time passes. We're all born into this world in chaos, and therefore we can all kind of universally just agree that everything is fucked up and that the generations are not the problem. The reason why I think that there was this so much generational disdain between the previous generations is because the boomers just legit fucked everything up. Like, there's no two ways around it. The boomers were one of the most harmful generations in human history, and I'm not exaggerating, in human history. They destroyed the social fabric. They absolutely annihilated everything that had been fought for decades before them by labor movements and by radicals and revolutionaries of various kinds. They really sold everyone out. And of course, not all boomers, as we might want to note. There are plenty of boomers who didn't believe in all that and were dissenters, but shockingly small amount. And I think that's why all of us tend to have so much disdain for boomers, is how arrogant they tend to be, while at the same time they did such extraordinary damage to the whole world, including the ecology. And so it kind of seems like we're cursed with the continued existence of their generation, and we're all just biding our time until they die. And so that leads to a lot of resentment. But I really don't think that we see anything similar between the generations after Gen X. I mean, Gen X is like an invisible generation, basically. Like, barely anybody even notes Gen X's difference. Gen X is a lot like the boomers, but they kind of seem a little less arrogant, a little bit less confidence, a little bit less confident in their damaging ideology. They kind of seem like they were recognizing something was about to go wrong, but they didn't really know what it was. So they kind of had the aesthetic of rebellion without understanding what a rebellion would look like. So I think what we'll see is that all generations after the millennials are probably going to have more intergenerational solidarity. That's my opinion. We'll see. Mike says, can you comment on Deleuze and Guattari and the state apparatus of capture, its failure, the war machine, and nomadicism? It's funny because I know what each of those mean by themselves, but I don't think I could give you an articulate connection of all of those things to one another. I've only read a little bit of Deleuze and Guattari. I have not read enough to call myself an expert of any kind, so I'm not going to bear forth here. What I will say is I do find them very interesting, and I do intend to read more of them in the future. Could you do a video on direct action or demos in a fictional context, or a video on tactics used during the summer of 2020? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, that might come into an analysis somewhere, like in Anark or Bridged or something. Amit Reina says, Ethel McDonald, are you a fan of her activism? I don't know enough about her to say, so. Is it advisable to read Marx, Capital? Yeah, read Capital. It's good. The economic manuscripts are good. The Grundrisse. Those kinds of things are really interesting. They were very formative for me in my foundations a long time ago. I think he has a lot of great works, actually. He was a really, really important theorist. Deep Cut says, I think Americans are much more likely to get behind an anarchist revolution than an authoritarian Marxist one based on commonly held views. Do you? Yes, absolutely. Or rather, I think that you're going to find more people in America that are going to side with a more libertarian, socialist, or anarchist view than you are with an authoritarian view. But that's not to say that that's a broadly or universally the case. I think there are a lot of people who are authoritarian right-wingers who would probably be amenable to an authoritarian left-wing conception if presented to them in the right way. And I think that's what all of these quote-unquote MAGA communists are banking on. That being said, you can see that they're really not making very much headway. They're not getting a lot of conservatives. They're not building a movement of conservatives who are becoming quote-unquote MAGA communists. In my experience, anarchism is much more able to communicate with the average person in the United States. Homo erectus were the real anarchists all along. Oh, the chat just refreshed here. This keeps happening. I keep thinking that I'm near the bottom of the chat and then it refreshes. I'll be right back. I'm going to use the restroom. All right, I have returned. Continuing on. So Exius Agron, just on Marx, if your opinion is that he's closer to libertarian socialism than Marxism-Leninism, then why did the anarchists split from the First International over the Marxists advocating for state supremacy and economic organization? I know later in life he cozied up a bit more to syndicalism, but he was still a firm believer in statist socialism. Well, one thing that should be said is that there was a lot of miscommunication in the First International. You know, some significant amount of that fissure took place because people sort of miscommunicated the decisions that had been made in contingents elsewhere. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that you're actually right to some degree that Marx at that point in his career was much more of a parliamentarian. I think that was something that decreased over the course of his life. But another thing is that back then they were continually portraying the anarchists as being like anti-organizationalist, even though they were not. The Marxists were being portrayed as wanting a central state when they really didn't seem to. The Marxists tended to be saying what they wanted was the absolute power of the proletariat, represented and they considered that the representation of a state, quote unquote. And the anarchists were pointing out, they were like, that's not a state and you shouldn't call it a state. We're not looking to create a state. What we're trying to do is abolish the state. And that led to some prolific theoretical miscommunication, misunderstanding. But I will say that particular split did take place to some degree because Marx was kind of plotting to push the anarchists out. And it seems like he was pretty successful in that. Well said about human nature. Clip that, please. I don't know. It might be a good one to clip, actually. Sean says, what do you think about Allende era Chile's project CyberSyn, cybernetic economic? CyberSyn's really cool. And I actually just researched a ton about it because I've been researching about Stafford Beer and cybernetics and all of that. And it had a lot of promise. That being said, it is more centralized than I thought it was before I started reading about it. It didn't need to be. In fact, Stafford Beer, their main person who was, who helped them build CyberSyn essentially from the ground up, suggested that it shouldn't be centralized and the central components were actually bad and that they were damaging the longevity of the project. But none of that ended up mattering because it got cooed. So yeah, there's a lot I could say about that, but I'll try to keep these brief so I can get moving. What advice would you have for anarchists and non-sectarian organizations like the IWW for dealing with authoritarian leftists in the group? Just don't let them structure the group in an authoritarian leftist manner. Like, the key is maintaining the horizontality of the group. Don't let them get into positions of power. Don't let them create a hierarchical relation within the group. The more hierarchical power that they are able to create, the more that your local will be damaged. But in the IWW, they don't care about your political allegiance. Therefore, there's really no reason why you could say that they should be pushed out. But just don't allow them to restructure the functionality of the group to be more hierarchical for their own needs, because they co-opt almost everything they get involved with. Sulaith, I don't know. Love your content, Anark. Thanks a lot for making it. What do you usually reply to a state is necessary to protect socialism argument? A lot of things. But I would say the most thorough response to that argument I give is in part 4 of The State is Counter-Revolutionary. An alternative can be seen in constructing the revolution and after the revolution. But I've already kind of answered that a few times on the stream, so I'm going to keep on going. Long story short, confederations of militias can do the job, and modern warfare is based a lot around confederations of militias and guerrilla conflict. There's a reason anthropologists are often anarchists, because despite colonial propaganda, a lot of pre-contact societies were not very authoritarian. These countries were discovered via a monarchical lens, so therefore are portrayed as ruler and ruled via that lens. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. Anthropology tends to create anarchists, and lots of anarchists are very interested in anthropology because once you know about the diversity of human societies, you realize that hierarchy is not a bygone conclusion. That's not just necessarily how everything has to be organized. So, yeah. Sorry, my phone is blowing up. Since rulers are human, is their tendency also not a human nature, though? I do not think we should dehumanize them. So where are the tendencies coming from? Serious question. Baby anarchist here. I just don't think that it comes... I'll put it this way. I think human nature, insofar as it exists, is predicated around plasticity and adaptability. So what that means is we are able to fit into almost any niche, and we are able to turn almost anything into our niche. That includes different kinds of power structures. That does not mean, however, that we are going to be happy with all of those niches or all of those power structures. Because we are very adaptable, we could do just about anything, but that doesn't mean that that is to our benefit. And what we see is humans can indeed form both hierarchical and horizontal societies, but hierarchical societies tend to bring about misery in the masses of people that are within them. The more hierarchical they are, the more miserable people tend to be. And the majority of human progress has been in the process of decentralizing power. And the more decentralized power tends to become, the more that people seem to have control over their lives, and they develop some form of agency, and that agency tends to make humans feel more fulfilled in their lives. People tend to be more fulfilled when they have agency, when they have autonomy, when they have ability to make decisions about how their lives proceed. So I'm not trying to say that the rulers aren't humans. They are, and the humans are very adaptable, so they can become rulers in the wrong circumstances. Humans are very conditioned by context. We're very, very conditioned by our environment. So if you put them in hierarchical structures, they will internalize the ethos of hierarchical power structures. In my work, I call this hierarchical realism, which people that are in hierarchical structures have a tendency to believe that hierarchy is the only way anything can be organized. So this leads them then to supporting and reinforcing hierarchical structures that really aren't to their benefit most of the time, and are certainly not to the benefit of the masses of people, because they believe that the only way anything can be organized is through hierarchical power. Valkus says, counterpoint, the ability to remain emotionally disconnected and totally rational during an argument is a point of privilege and indicates that your stake isn't tied inherently to your right to exist. Yeah, it's a really common talking point, but it's just factually incorrect. There have been a lot of things that I have been involved in, a lot of arguments I've been involved in, where the argument, I definitely have stakes in the argument. And yet, I've been able to maintain emotional stability and not lash out and harass the other person. Moreover, there are plenty of examples of people doing the same that have all kinds of different stakes and all kinds of different arguments. I dislike the idea that people who have stakes in something and who are on the other side of oppression are all going to be emotionally unstable and lashing out at people all the time. And them lashing out and being emotionally unstable is a demonstration of their oppressed position. I think that it's belittling to people who are in oppressed situations. And in fact, what I've seen is some of the most articulate, calm argumentation about any subject I've ever seen come from people who are in very oppressed circumstances. Recently, we've seen this with people who are in Palestine. Some of the most powerful conversations we've seen about Palestine have been people who are Palestinian being invited onto news networks and really like thoroughly rebutting the talking points of the establishment. And they're not doing it by yelling and emotionally lashing out. And if they had, they would have looked bad, and it probably would have damaged the credibility of the Palestinian movement. Instead, what they did is they calmly explained how what is taking place in Palestine is a genocide. They laid out the details. They explained the history. And those clips are the ones that got proliferated everywhere because those were so much more persuasive. And I really don't think you can argue that those people who were literally living in in the midst of a genocide didn't have enough stake in the situation, and that's the reason they were able to stay calm. So I really disagree with this talking point. I think it's not only false in practice, it's just false in theory. I think people are just making excuses for why they're allowed to lash out at people. You should not lash out at people. Stop doing that. Have you noticed authoritarians mostly don't talk about policy or organization, but rather attack you for using the wrong words, like not wanting you to say the word authoritarianism or statism? Yeah, there's a lot of that. What you'll find is that authoritarians, in a general sense, don't want there to be any words available to describe the structural differences that would impugn them. So if they feel that some word allows us to articulate the reason why their method is damaging, they want to destroy that word completely. They want to obscure it. They want to broaden it out until it's meaningless. And this is extremely universal. They'll do this with any word that is damaging to them. You'll notice that they're constantly whining about the word authoritarian. They're constantly whining about the word tanky. Fascists are constantly whining about the word fascist. Racists are constantly whining about the word racist. Because these words, they carry the weight of their concept. So what they want to do is destroy the word so the concept can't be articulated. Hadim says, great to catch you live. Been a watcher for a while now. You were a big part in my radicalization from market socialist to anarchist. Do you have any advice for anarchists without a local movement? I'm sorry to tell you, but you have to build the local movement. You know, if you are in it, we might say, look at all the places where there are no anarchists present. We might say, damn, it'd be great if there was even one. You are that one. That's you. So now your job is to find a way to get people radicalized. You're going to have to figure that out in your context. This is kind of something, as I was saying to other people earlier, I would have to know a lot about your context to tell you what to do, but just keep in mind that like printing out pamphlets and tabling and starting reading groups, those are all really great small scale ways to get started. But yeah. Ruckley says, intersectionality requires being able to take criticism because there's always views and experiences you are ignorant of. Humility is necessary for empathy. Agreed completely. Absolutely. And something people need to understand, this kind of relating to the previous topic, we are not going to be able to have hard conversations if people are so defaulted to reactive, emotional lashing out at other people that is our default. When that is our default, we can't have real conversations. All we're going to have is a one-sided harassment. We're going to have people who can't really express the ideas they have, and there is no back and forth. There is just one person shouting at another person. And when you start shouting at another person, you start belittling them, you start lashing out at them, you start harassing them, they're not going to respond by agreeing with you. They're going to be either afraid, they're going to escalate in response, they're going to themselves start emotionally lashing out back at you, and nothing is going to get done. Nothing is going to get done. It is the least helpful thing you could do if you actually want to change somebody's mind. In a general sense, when you harass somebody like that and you lash out at them, what you're actually going to do is make them just stop saying the thing you don't like. You're not going to make them stop thinking it. You're not going to make them stop doing it. You're just going to make them stop saying it. And insofar as we're talking about fascists, go for it. That's a good way to go. Harass fascists. That works. But insofar as we're talking about between allies and people that you could actually possibly convince to hold your positions, you got to stop people. We're not going to be able to have these conversations if everybody acts that way, especially given intersectionality. everybody is on the one or another end of they're the beneficiary of one or another hierarchical power structure. And insofar as that everybody has gotten into the default mode, that all they do is emotionally lash out at people, we're not going to be able to have those very difficult, detailed conversations. Intersectionality is complicated. It does not avail itself to simple reactive knee-jerk. So yeah, please, next time you feel when you're in a discussion with somebody that is a difficult discussion, when you feel your emotions well up, ask yourself, how productive are the things you're about to say actually going to be? Are they actually going to change anybody's mind, or are they just going to allow you to eliminate the discomfort of somebody disagreeing with you in the conversation? Because if it's the latter, you're not doing anybody any favors but yourself, and you probably just shouldn't even be present. You should only be present in a discussion like that if you actually think you're going to be able to change somebody's mind. You need to make a concerted effort to change people's mind, and that requires calming yourself when you're about to become reactive. And that goes for me too. I've done it on Twitter, for example. Like, I'll be on Twitter, somebody will say something, and all at once I'll just feel it well up in me. You know, my heartbeat will get faster. I can just feel my stress going up, and I'll have this tendency to just start being reactive and kind of emotional in my responses. That is never helpful. Never, ever helpful. I always realize that I did the wrong thing afterwards. But during it, I feel so vindicated. I have to do it. Have to. I'm just here to tell all of you, you don't have to. I'm guilty of it too. I know y'all are probably guilty of it. Stop justifying it and just practice self-control, please. What are your thoughts on criticizing ML projects? The auth socks I'd talk to say that even if I dislike them, I'm sabotaging the cause of socialism. They aren't socialist, so it's not sabotaging the cause of socialism. That's the first thing I would say. Criticize them as you please. Just don't lie about them. There's no reason to be dishonest or false. Just be honest. Just criticize the particular details that are wrong with those projects, and the particular details that they never achieved socialism. In fact, they've only ever acted as a counter-revolution against socialism to establish capitalism. I've only felt an impetus to engage with political systems recently and in response to climate breakdown. Is this an area that other anarchists are concerned about? I would have to have clarification about what you mean engaging with political systems. What do you think about the limited time frame we have regarding climate change action? Start now. I don't predict the future. I don't project outcomes. I'm just going to say what has to be done. And what has to be done is that we have to begin building. All of you, all of you who are listening right now, begin asking how you can do something to change the current conditions, how you can begin building an organization which has the power to actually force power structures to change what they are doing. Begin asking yourself what can be done to change what is happening, because it is not trivial. What lies in the balance is life on this planet. That's all I can say. Can't tell you what's going to happen. Can't tell you whether we'll win or lose. Watch the video Hope. Are you opposed to all forms of competition? No. I do think there is such a thing as a sort of consenting competition. For example, sports. In sports, we all come together and we agree to the competition, right? I can either play or not play. And whether I eat or not is not determined by that. That's not part of the stakes. But as soon as coercion begins to be involved and people's base sustenance begins to be involved in this competitive process, that's when things get really bad. Competition can be healthy so long it takes place within particular bounds. Do you support the Confederacy's right to split from the USA purely on principle? No, because the Confederacy was trying to maintain slavery and was therefore subjugating an enormous number of people. In a very real way, the U.S. preventing the Confederacy from seceding was actually them preventing the continuation of slavery, and was an act of self-defense of those slaves in the South. And ultimately, even though they didn't necessarily intend it in the short term, a defense of slaves in the North and the abolition of slavery in a long-term sense. So no, insofar as that they seceded, I would have said that they should have been an enemy nation. They were a slave nation, you know? The best people to ask about the nitty gritty of organizing is the people you are organizing with. Sometimes. At least they'll tell you about conditions. They don't necessarily have all the answers, though. Hassan Khan says, have you heard of the Fauda anarchist movement in Palestine? I've heard of them. And I have a few articles that I want to read about them, but I have not yet gotten around to it. Do you know of worker co-ops that craft furniture, particularly for a bedroom? I do not, unfortunately. Riot Ready. Submedia does have their own video uploading services. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Keep that in mind. Sim Not Sam. I find that criticism fair. I sometimes find it difficult to have a healthy approach during a bit of conflict. I just feel embarrassed when I fail. Yeah, well, unfortunately, to get good at anything and in articulating yourself as one of those things, you have to screw it up quite a few times. You know, like what I always say, and this is like kind of one of the things I said in an older video essay, which was called The Value of Dispute, is I recommend trying to disagree and articulate yourself in safe environments, low stakes environments. Not only will you feel less nervous and therefore like be given time to think through your arguments, but also if you screw up, who cares? You know, it was low stakes. That's the whole purpose. And to some degree, the internet is low stakes. People treat those one-on-one conversations they have as high stakes. Most of the time they're not. Most of the time, you know, you could talk to them afterwards and bring up more thoughts and so on and so on. You know, like I would understand it's high stakes to get in front of 1,000 people or 10,000 people and have a debate, but if you're just talking with one person, the stakes are pretty low. So I would recommend taking each of those as opportunities to sort of hone your rhetoric, think about your arguments, listen to their arguments, and then think about them afterwards. If you take this approach where it's more about experimenting and that it's okay to fail so long as you kind of discover things, then you will probably get way better at conveying your points and articulating yourself. Hey, Anark, do you like anarcho-punk? If so, what are your favorite bands? Generally, I don't really like punk. I like post-punk. So I do like Parquet Courts and Proto-Martyr, for example. But in general, not a huge fan of punk. How do you justify ANCOM in the framework of social and political systems? That's a huge question. We write books of political theory answering questions like that. So I would recommend you watch my videos, A Modern Anarchism, parts 1, 2, and 3. Or if you want more introductory material, watch the video Power. Yeah, recommended some Lorenzo Cambo Irvin. That's what I like to see. Everybody should read Anarchism and the Black Revolution. It's fucking awesome. But there's some also good recommendations here. The Commune by Black Autonomy Federation and Autonomy as a Revolutionary Tendency by Lorenzo Cambo Irvin. Connor Langerman says, on the matter of authoritarians, how do they keep the rank and file soldiers loyal? I always found it odd that the lowly private would be loyal to a system that oppresses them as well. A mixture of them actually agreeing with the ideology of the hierarchical system, number one. But number two, systems of regimentation are about breaking you down. Like the whole purpose of boot camp is to break you down and then reform you in the image of the hierarchical power. They function a lot like a cult. They really do. They destroy your previous conception of self, and they reform your conception of self in a way which is beneficial for hierarchy. So by the end of it, you tend to be quite a bit more ideologically brainwashed. And at the same time, they give you strength. They teach you how to do violence effectively. Furthermore, there are negative, there are repercussions if you don't follow after you've joined, right? Like being a deserter, it can be disastrous for the rest of your life. Like deserters are often executed in hierarchical power structures. So yeah, there's a few different reasons. Some is actual buy-in, some is coercion, Vigard says, apologize if you already touched on it, but when you said that engaging political campaigning would be a waste of time, would you say that Vosh's engaging with progressive victory would be as well? Yeah, that's actually one of the only real, that's the thing that I've said before. If I were to have a debate with Vosh, it'd probably be over that topic. I think Vosh spends too much time on electoral politics. I think that there's already social democrats and liberals and all of them doing plenty of work about getting different people elected. I think that if you have a libertarian socialist view, you should not be spending your time on that. You should be spending your time on trying to get people to build bottom-up power, because bottom-up power can do more to get people elected than the elections themselves, because the bottom-up power threatens power structures into doing the things you want. And every time we've got a progressive era in this nation, it's because there was a coordinate, massive labor movement or a massive bottom-up movement of some kind that scared the power structure. The key is you build the bottom-up power structure. Then you might, as an outcome, get some elections on your side. Oh God. But the chat is refreshed. Great. Wow. Completely lost my place. I mean, just as I'm browsing through, has Second Thought responded to your critique? Not to my knowledge. What is your opinion of some kind of democratic or parliamentary revolutionary socialism? I don't think it really works. I mean, you can look at the social democrats, for example, in a variety of countries and see that they don't really do a whole lot, or rather they do a lot and then they backslide. Looks like we've got some new donations. Harrison donated $5. Sports question. Name 4 anarchists, alive or dead, you'd do a 5-a-side soccer team with. 1 goalkeeper, 2 defenders, 2 forwards. Who plays where and why? My friend, I appreciate the $5, but I know literally nothing about sports. I've never been much for sports. I don't even know what would make somebody good at each of these roles. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I appreciate the donation, but I literally have got nothing there. Nothing. I don't know. Being a goalkeeper, you want to be big, right? No, you want to be fast. I have no idea. I have no idea what to tell. I'm sorry. Let's see. We got 100 of some currency. I don't recognize that symbol. But it says, do you think Rojava might stop its flow of oil into Israel to stop the Palestinian genocide? Might it? Maybe, I don't know, but it could, and that'd probably be a good thing to do. However, to my knowledge, I didn't know they were selling to Israel. I thought they were selling to the United States, and the United States was kind of acting as proxy to Israel. But, yeah, I think that would actually be very effective if Rojava wanted to put pressure on Israel to stop the Palestinian genocide. I think that if they have any flow of oil to Israel, they should stop providing it. That being said, Israel could get it from elsewhere, but it would be at least some pressure. It's the combination of many pressures together that do these kind of things. So I appreciate the donations, everybody. Let's get back to live chat here. Pin archives. How far back is Anark right now? I was really far back. Okay, listen, I don't even know. I'm just going to browse through. It's hard to even find out where I was at this point. Oh, okay. Well, I can't browse up anymore. Okay. So I'm going to go back down. Oh, okay. We got somebody here talking shit about the CNTFAI. Okay. Lying and saying they quote unquote got wrecked by the nationalist armies. It's not true. In fact, the CNTFAI was one of the most effective fighting forces in the entirety of Spain at that time. They were not defeated by Franco. CNTFAI was defeated by a Bolshevik betrayal, where the Bolsheviks literally got the army of the Spanish Republic to go out and unexpectedly sack the collectives when they didn't even expect it to come. And that's the reason why the CNTFA lost. They were actually very effectively fighting back Franco, and they're the reason why those entire autonomous territories existed to begin with, is because they were able to fight back the fascists so effectively. I guess this is respond to the claim that horizontal organizing is ineffective because all the work falls on one or a handful of people. I disagree. I think that is an effect of what you might call anti-organizational or non-organizational organizing. Power structures or creating an organizational structure is what fixes that problem. So if you have no organizational structure, it is absolutely the case that what you will get is the sort of hierarchy of duism or the duocracy. And duocracy will make it to where just a few people end up assuming power because they're the ones who do so much. And I think that is part of the reason why I am not an anti-organizationalist. I've seen that fail way too many times, and it will never be any different because that is just the natural dynamic of not having organization. What do you think of the 21st century's extreme focus on identity, wokeism? Is it not just a liberal ploy to pretend to care about issues rather than solve them, like the girl boss phenomena? No. I think that part of what's happening with the focus on identity is that we're moving out of the era of economic reductionism. And that takes many different forms. There are liberal forms, but there are also radical and revolutionary forms. I also wouldn't use the word wokeism. That's way too co-opted by right-wingers at this point. But liberal identity politics absolutely are about just caring about issues rather than solving them. That's the liberal mantra, basically, is not solving the roots of the issues. It's about doing token reforms that barely do anything. What do you think about individual wealth? Is it inherently hierarchical, even if it doesn't use private property or exploitation? No, not necessarily. I think it kind of depends on what that wealth is. What are you actually accumulating? You know, and are you preventing other people from using those things because you are hoarding them? Hoarding behavior is generally negative. It leads to more scarcity. So I would say distribution is what we're looking for, but obviously everybody is going to have different amounts of possessions no matter what kind of system or structure we create. And that's not necessarily bad, just in the same way that some people are going to be better or worse at particular tasks, which might be useful in society. And that's also not inherently bad. It's about whether you are hoarding that knowledge, for example, right? It's kind of the reason why paywalls are bad, but public journals are good, right? So yeah. Yeah, CNT-FAI got sabotaged by the NKVD under orders from Stalin because authoritarians always choose fascism over anarchism. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. That's pretty much exactly what happened. Unpredictable Axolotl says, congrats on 20 plus, Anark. Thank you very much. Then very much a reliable follower at this point. I've seen you many times, Unpredictable Axolotl. What do you think of Zizek and Fisher? Feel like the cultural critiques of capitalism are interesting, but not helpful moving forward. Feel like it can even be paralyzing or reinforce capitalist realism. Yeah, basically I have the same feeling. To be honest, sorry to any Zizek fans here, but Zizek has never really struck me as a super serious philosopher. I kind of see him as like it almost seems like half of what he says is like he's fucking with you, and the other half, like there's some insight there. But for me, it never amounts to very much. Fisher, I appreciate him introducing capitalist realism, but it actually seems like Fisher himself was kind of falling victim to capitalist realism. Like he kind of became so pessimistic, he thought it couldn't change. Is hanging posters around the city explaining what anarchism is good strategy? I don't know. That seems like a decent thing to try. Give it a go, see how it goes. And then on it, put a link to somewhere where anarchists can meet together. Make it a place where it's anonymous so that nobody's at risk. You know, it could end up being kind of a honeypot, right? It could be like that, you know, bad actors would also go there. But, you know, make it, figure out a way to explain anarchism to people and then give people in your city a place to discuss anarchism. And then you might find allies there. Just, you know, be careful. Bad actors will probably try to get involved too. So I'll just repeat this one. Love and Fury says, anyone in Las Vegas, we have a growing group of active anarchists. We're creating a network of mutual aid groups, distributing zines and literature, hosting events, and most importantly, organizing. There you go. So anybody in Las Vegas? States are cults, but are cults states? No, that's not the way I look at it. I think the state is a mass organization of alienation. So I think the state definitely follows some of the cult's basic functions, but it doesn't do it over an entire contiguous territory. It's almost like a proto-state, is what I've said before. It's like it's a miniaturization of the dynamics of the state. Last name is pronounced Longergon. Oh, there's a G in there before the E? Okay. So y'all are having a conversation here. So I'm trying to catch up to questions. Yeah, the lunar dot basically mirrors my feeling, which is I can only imagine what would be accomplished if Vosh directed his fans to build horizontal organizations with sustaining power where he lives. That's kind of the way I feel. I think that if I were to say what he should be doing, that's what he should be doing. He should be using that platform to encourage people to organize rather than get so involved in electoral politics. Oh, the chat refreshed again. Yeah, I'm going to have to just skip through this a little bit and getting caught up. I'm going to try to catch up here. Would you ever consider doing a collaboration with Andrewism? Absolutely. That would be great. May happen one day. We'll see. Thoughts on Israel and Palestine from a broad perspective. Also Attack on Titan. I've never seen Attack on Titan. Israel and Palestine, kind of gave some of my thoughts on it earlier, but Palestine is currently in the middle of a genocide. And, doesn't really matter what kind of negative things you can say about Hamas or Palestine. They're defending themselves from a genocide right now. Like, it's as simple as that. Will Israel stop after the last episode drops, or will a non-AoE only? I have no idea what you're talking about there. A non-AoE only embolden them. Yeah, not sure what you're talking about. Opinion on anarcho-fascism. It doesn't exist. It's not real. Do you have more obscure examples of anarchism in practice aside from the main ones you usually bring up? Yeah, you've got so many. Give me a sec. I'm going to, let's see here. At one point I made like a big list of all kinds of like autonomous territories and stuff like that. I'm going to see if I can find it right now. Yeah. I am going to share it in the chat. Here you go. It's a Google Doc with a ton of different groups and autonomies and throughout history. At one point, I made a big thread where I asked people to just give me examples, and they gave so many different examples. And I'm actually under the impression that this still is not exhaustive. There's still more stuff that this doesn't include. Yeah, I see that a bunch of you are there. It looks like already 13 people are looking at the document. Feel free to save that and distribute it around. I have made many authoritarian leftists angry with that document. They start trying to nitpick it, and it starts all kinds of really fun conversations. But the overwhelming number of things on the list tends to kind of disorient them. So let's see here. What's your opinion on lentils? Lentils are awesome. Have you read Means and Ends by Zoe Baker? And if so, what did you think of it? Yes, I have, and it was excellent. Everybody should read Means and Ends by Zoe Baker. Probably the best single text you could get to ground yourself in the history and praxis of anarchism all at once. Obviously there are books that are going to go into more depth on any of those given details, but Zoe's book is a great overview of those topics. NG9 says, do you think to achieve anarchy in society, we need to get to a certain level of technological advancement that would make the need for a state unnecessary? I think that AI will lead to anarchy. I think we're already there, to be honest. If there was some technological structure that was needed, we already have it. It's the internet. Okay, like all of the old logistic arguments for being able to organize over over very long distances with people who aren't local to you and confederation, all of that can be solved. We've got the internet, we've got computers, problem solved. It's time to put the implementation in practice. Like, we don't need anything more than this to do what is needed at this point. The problem is that everybody, or the majority of software developers, aren't developing with the idea of creating a horizontal revolution. They are designing to create hierarchical software to bolster hierarchical needs, those of corporations and the state. To what extent have your beliefs been impacted by Marx and Marxist thinkers? I personally think it's really interesting that Zoe Baker, for example, describes herself as both an anarchist and a Marxist. Yes, many anarchists are also influenced by Marx. That's part of the reason why you'll find many anarchists who don't like when Leninists and Stalinists and Maoists call themselves Marxists, because Marx is still a very influential thinker among anarchists. In fact, Bakunin was very influenced by Marx, even though Bakunin and Marx famously had a huge spat. Bakunin's economic analysis is very Marxist. If you go read Bakunin's work, The Capitalist System, it sounds like a really wonderful summary of Marx's economic critique of capitalism, but with a little bit of analysis of the state mixed in. It's really good. Yeah. I always hear about the C&T camps and the Zapatistas' bans on drugs and sex work. The C&T camps, most anarchists condemn them. I think that insofar as that you just have camps for prisoners of war, that's not a bad thing. You have to have some place to keep prisoners of war. And it should be said, what we do know about those camps is that they were way, way, way less oppressive than most other labor camps. Literally, people could decide whether they were going to do labor in a lot of these camps, which is pretty wild. But they mostly served as camps for prisoners of war. That being said, I do think there was some forced labor, which is regrettable. But it really seems more like a gotcha than anything else. Like comparing that to any of the authoritarian left efforts is just silly. The C&T camps were very minimal, and they had very high rates of the fascists just completely deconverting from fascism and abandoning the Franco's army and joining the anarchists instead. So the Zapatista ban on drugs and sex work, that even though I disagree with them, that came from the bottom up. The councils made that decision. That was not imposed on them from top down by some state structure. They made that decision together. I think it's really important for people to understand that when the councils get together and make a decision about how their society will function, they're allowed to make whatever decision they like about how their society will function, insofar as it does not violate the autonomy of other people. Now, I do think that they shouldn't ban drugs and sex work, but they are being countervailed by the cartels right now. And the cartels are definitely trying to flood drugs into the Zapatista territories. There is definitely a problem with pimping in a general sense, and women being forced into prostitution in Mexico. There are big problems in Mexico with patriarchy. So these, and to be honest, historically, banning drugs, especially banning alcohol, has happened in a lot of autonomous territories, because in a lot of occasions, alcohol is a drug of despair that people use when they're at the very, very bottom, and it even more permanently destroys their life, where they do things that are regrettable, they lash out. This is not to justify it. I think that they made the wrong decision. If I were the Zapatistas, I certainly would not ban drugs and sex work. But these are the reasons why you can see these things happened. It's up to you whether you then choose to condemn them or whether you find them to be acceptable compromises. Personally, on the former, I think some aspect of the camps was an acceptable compromise. I think forced labor is probably bad. Just having POW camps isn't bad. But banning drugs and sex work, I disagree with them, but they made that decision themselves. It's not being imposed on them. They made the decision to do that themselves. So it's based on consensus, and it can be taken back and changed at their whim. So if they want to then get rid of those bans, they can. That being said, I've never heard of the ban on sex work, so that one's new to me. I've only heard of the ban, in fact, not even on all drugs, just alcohol. That's the only one I had heard of, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Okay, finally, no, I'm not catching up, but whatever. Thoughts on egoism? Watch part 2 of A Modern Anarchism. How do we show normal people that anarchism isn't scary or about disorder? To them, the aesthetic of anarchism isn't about being rebel teenagers. It's frustrating to break that typecast. I think building the alternatives that demonstrate what anarchism is actually about, probably good. Probably good. Thoughts on the new atheists like Hitchens, Dawkins, etc.? Good critiques of religion, but they pretty much all became reactionaries and their politics were absolute fucking garbage. And the results of the new atheist movement was a bunch of reactionaries. So that's just the sad truth of it. Yeah. Insofar as like the philosophical religious arguments, they were mostly correct. But if anything outside of that, very harmful, really silly stuff. The branching to Gamergate and anti-feminist stuff was just extremely disgraceful. They destroyed any respect that people had for them in that process. Thoughts on being a boomer in the Zoomer age? I'm sure that sucks for the boomers. Yeah. I mean, damn, now they got like 3 generations trashing on them. Let's see. Okay. Have you heard that the FARJ has now merged with other Brazilian libertarian socialist organizations into the OSL? Yeah, that's very heartening. You know, that's a good sign, by the way. When you have a bunch of libertarian socialist or anarchist organizations and there's so many of them and they're so big that now they're federating together, that means you're building power. That's really good. So I'm very happy to see that the OSL now exists. It's a demonstration their method is working and that their strength is growing. Hello from the ancient city of York. I assume that means the actual city of York. Was that like in the UK somewhere? I assume. I don't know anything. Let's see here. Panos Rousas says, during a course in the theory of law and institutions, the professor spoke about the rise of the individual in juxtaposition to community. Would you say that these concepts are inherently antagonistic? This is also, once again, part 2 of a modern anarchism. They don't have to be. They can be. You can formulate them as being in opposition to one another. However, both would be wrong. Extreme focus on community and only the community is wrong. Extreme focus on the individual and only the individual is wrong. It's both. Communities consist of individuals, and communities change the way individuals are formed. If you like dialectics, you might say that there is a dialectic between these. Neither exist without the other. Individuals without community go crazy. Okay, like solitary confinement is a form of torture. It destroys people's brains. And community without individual is just conformity and regimentation. So you have to have both. You have to have an emphasis on both individual and community. And that's what I'm talking about in part 2 of a modern anarchism. That's part of the thesis of social anarchism. Thoughts on left comms and council communists. Already talked about council communists previously. Left comms are very diverse. Some of them I very thoroughly disagree with. Council communists are just Marxist anarcho-syndicalists in denial. And that's fine. If they could just stop being so antagonistic to anarchism, they probably would have more allies. The internet is a battle between anarchistic systems versus techno-feudalists. That is pretty accurate. Yes. Okay. I'm getting there. I will have to end the theme soon, or the stream soon. Probably here in about 30 minutes. Next 30 minutes, I will have to end the stream. I have to go do things. to be responsible, do my my side job. If you want to see me stop doing my side job and do even longer streams, you should go subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/Anark, ANARK. Or if you like, you can become a member here on YouTube by going and clicking the, I think it's like join button somewhere in the description. And then you can basically join any of the same tiers you would join on Patreon, but on YouTube instead. And either of those would be super helpful for me. Lastly, if you're trying to tip me, you got the super chats around here. Okay. You can just give me money. You can just do that, I guess. And my Cash App is there in the description if you just want to give me money that way. So all of those are acceptable ways to help Anark stop doing gig work on the side. Let's see. Why is your shirt cool? Just is that way. Just got a cool shirt. What can I say? Opinion on One Piece and how Hegelian socialist theory might relate to the overall story structure. If you've watched it, I haven't watched it, but you're selling it. How does the right to bear arms relate to anarchist societies? Now that weapons of mass destruction exist, how would anarchist societies prevent them from being used? Who would get to control them? You could create federations, or you could create particular like council structures whose entire job was to maintain and monitor the existence of any nuclear weapons that are still in functionality. I doubt you're ever going to get rid of all of them. That's that once technology exists, you never put it back in the box. Okay. This is what Pandora's box as a myth was always about. Once knowledge exists, it never goes away. You just have to deal with its existence afterwards and the chaos that it creates. So you'd probably want to create particular councils of experts which oversee the existence of any of those nuclear weapons that still exist. How does the right to bear arms relate to anarchist societies? Yeah, I would say the right to bear arms that can rationally be used for self-defense. That makes sense. So, the right to own a firearm or whatever. But, a nuke is not a means for rational self-defense, right? There's never any time where you're going to need a nuke to defend yourself from another person. So that's my reasoning is that it seems totally rational to arm the people insofar as they can defend themselves, and that militias can act together to defend the community. Lucy says, random thought after joining within the word limit. Love your videos. I think more focus must be put on existing structures. Have you heard of the FEC in North America or Longomai network in Europe? No, I have not. But those both, I will look into both of those. Give me just a second. I'm actually going to open tabs on those. Cool. There's one of them. The other one was Longomai. Oh, come on. Longomai network. Cool. I have tabs open for both of those now. I'll research them later. Sorry, you're probably hearing my computer sounds right now. I need to mute notifications. There we go. Okay, so I'm back. Let's see here. The reason I don't favor anarchism is due to the ethnic and cultural groups of different nations and countries. Many would like to have a state for their people. So how would you go about this dilemma? I think that states are bad for every people. I think that any ethnic or cultural people should not want to have a state. They should want to have a say in the horizontal confederation of structures. And in fact, society becomes more powerful for everyone as we create a more diverse structure that represents everyone's needs together. The more confederated we can make all of these structures, the more everyone's needs will be met. States are exploitative of the people that they supposedly represent. So people can be duped into supporting them, and many people are. I understand lots of cultural and ethnic groups are duped into believing that their world will be made better by having a state to quote unquote represent them, but it is never in their benefit. And part of it's never in their benefit by comparison to having an anarchistic system where they are acting together with many other kinds of people in order to create a diverse and flexible complementary structure. That being said, I understand, lots of times it's going to be preferable to have a state rather than, say, being genocided or destroyed by colonial incursion. So I don't condemn them for that fact. But I also know that that state they create in that process, as Fanon talks about in Wretched of the Earth, will become their new exploiter afterwards, that the national bourgeois that they previously dreamed of empowering will just become their new capitalist overlords. That the state structure that they used for vanguardist transition will become their controller. And then they'll be in a position where now they have carried out a revolution, but only transitioned into capitalism. So what I would say is the job of anarchists everywhere is to get people to think in truly revolutionary sense about what actually benefits their culture, what actually benefits their ethnicity. And that is generally going to be integration with confederations of other horizontal structures where everybody's say is heard and everybody's voice is taken into account when building consensus and making decisions together. Salt says, as a Chilean, I didn't get what you meant on second thought, Allende's lack of authoritarianism, because as far as I know, the coup came from inside the armed force. Yeah, well, I can't quite tell what you mean, because I was saying, yes, was authoritarian, but that's because, centralization of power is authoritarian. Second thought was the one that was saying it wasn't authoritarian enough, and that's why it failed. So what I was addressing was, well, no, it had a state, it had a military, it had police, it had prisons, it had all the things you said it needed, yet it still didn't prevent a coup. And it should be said, the coup came from inside the armed forces technically, but it was funded by outside forces. So the U.S. Had plans for what was going to take place in Chile. So it did not prevent the authoritarianism that Second Thought was claiming is needed to prevent coup, did not prevent coup. Yes, somehow it was an example of how not enough authoritarianism allowed them to be couped. I found that to be very unusual. Do you know maybe some group that could work for an anarcho-programmer to help by coding? You could try to reach out to black socialists in America. I don't know if they're still developing their dual power app, but that's something they were doing. Thoughts on Che Guevara? A liberation fighter that, was trying his best to free his people from despotism. But ultimately, state capitalism always leads to state capitalism, Understand he was very influential on a lot of people in Central and South America, but ultimately those methods aren't necessarily going to work in a wide variety of circumstances. And insofar as they did work, they didn't really work in bringing about a post-revolutionary society. Cuba is very largely just a social democratic society with some substantial state capitalism, which is moving more and more towards privatization. So I don't really see Che Guevara as like a bad person necessarily, but the praxis itself was insufficient to build socialism. Yeah, case in point, Israel, for Anark's point. Look how representative they are to their publicly stated ethnic representative group. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, Israel's the greatest example of how your ethnic group can think that the thing that will save them above all else is a state. You know, literally, you go through one of the most prolific genocides in human history. You go and you say, this is it. This is the end. We're going to stop this behavior now. We're going to create a state to represent our ethnicity. And just a few generations later, and now you're carrying out the genocide. Now you're suppressing your own people. Now anybody who is not just a rabid ethno-nationalist Zionist is being suppressed. You're like destroying your own culture because like literally Orthodox Jews are in the streets disagreeing with you, and you're sending out police to just beat them. Like ultimately, states are not built to protect you. They are built to parasitize your power. They only protect you insofar as that they need you to be alive so they can keep exploiting you. They don't care about you at all. States aren't built to care about you. States are built to protect you long enough to act like a parasite from you. That's all states everywhere. It doesn't matter what state it is. All states are parasites. All hierarchical power structures are parasitic. Their whole purpose is to only protect you long enough to steal your power, to take away your ability to make decisions about the world around you. That's it. Yeah, and as local friendly anarchist points out, a state for their people largely just amounts to ethno-states, and ethno-states are pretty much universally negative from what we've seen. We Maori had a federative structure pre-colonization. Even when the Maori king was implemented, everyone offered refused the mantle. Interesting. How do you personally feel about voting in the U.S.? Do you think there's an obligation to vote for the lesser of two evils? I feel that the protection of queer rights in the short term involves doing so. No, because I don't think voting makes much of a decision. I will say that your voting makes much of a difference. But the place it does make the most difference is in swing states. Okay. If you're in a swing state, whatever, I get it. Yeah. But if you are in either a red or a blue state, I hate to inform you, but your vote just literally doesn't matter. It does not matter. The place that matters at all are the primaries. So if you want to go vote in the primaries, even if you're in a red or a blue state, yeah. Okay. That's somewhat meaningful. But ultimately, whoever gets into power, you're not going to fix these problems, right? Notice how we have Biden right now, and yet we're still seeing the repeal of all kinds of basic rights for human beings. You know, we just lost the protections for abortion in the United States. Biden was president while that happened. And you just watch. Very soon, we're probably going to lose the right to gay marriage in that same sense, and states are going to start banning that little by little. This is happening while Biden is president. You know, like warrantless wiretapping and the implementation of a full surveillance state that happened while Obama was in presidency. Like, it just has to be understood that, yes, it might make some minor difference. And so therefore, that's why I tell people, okay, cool, go do it if you like. But spending more of your time than literally just going and casting the vote, going and working for campaigns and trying to convince people to vote one way or another and all that, that is a waste of your time. Spend all that effort, please, building something that is an actual power structure that could actually threaten the system as it stands. That's the only thing that matters. That's it. 99% of all of your effort in a political sense, insofar as organizing goes, I mean, should be spent on that, building a structure that actually has the power to threaten the system. So that's what I'm trying to say here. What were your thoughts about Chomsky having ties with Epstein? It's unclear in what way, and when confronted, he shoved it essentially under the rug. I don't know. It seemed like Epstein tried to have meetings with people and tried to get to know all kinds of people, particularly so that he could have like blackmail material on those people. Epstein was always trying to implicate everyone that he got involved with so that he had control over as many powerful figures as possible. And him even meeting with Chomsky was a point of blackmail over Chomsky. I think Chomsky just rejected it because the time he's like, I didn't know any better, you know? And to be fair, he probably didn't know any better. If he had, I would have said that was bad, but I don't think he did. So I don't know. It kind of seemed to me kind of like a nothing burger, even if Chomsky's response wasn't great. Now, if Chomsky had gone to the island, I would be like, oh, damn. Okay, well, no, fuck Chomsky. But he just like he just like had dinner with Epstein, and he probably didn't even know that Epstein was a horrifying monster. I think second thought is a Leninist. He probably thought he would have preferred to have a single party state after Allende got elected or something, as if that would have magically helped. Yeah. I mean, what? So why did all the ones with single party states get cooed? How'd that happen? Super weird. It's almost like that is not what prevents you from getting cooed. Okay, so we are coming around now to the last 10 minutes here. Kind of running out of steam a little bit. So I'm probably going to skip quite a few questions. I like Samuel Foresta's statement. I like anarchism because it is cool. You heard it here, folks. See you, Pin Archives. Have a good one. Second thought has not responded to my video, and I doubt he will. If I were him, I probably wouldn't. All it would do is give me some prominence in the process. What's the difference between a hierarchy and a hierarchical power structure? So, yeah, I think that that's a pretty minor difference. So, for example, hierarchies can be arbitrarily imposed while not determining how power flows. For example, if I make a ranked list 1 through 10 of a list of items, we might say that that ranked list is a hierarchy where first place, second place, third place, those are higher on the list than 9th, 10th place, etc. However, insofar as that's just a list, it's not a power structure in that process. A power structure determines how power is distributed and how it flows between individuals. And I think that's a key thing to understand. Because, for example, you could have, I use sports a lot as an example, but I think it's because it's an example of, in many occasions, of a consenting hierarchy, right? So, win and loss, that's a hierarchy, but it's not a hierarchical power structure. It's not determining how the power of society or the power of the many people are going to be distributed in a broad sense. So a hierarchy is really just a ranking of primacy or importance, but a hierarchical power structure is a ranking of primacy or importance, which gives those at the top of that hierarchy more power and more decision making over how the power of others is distributed. Hopefully that makes sense. And Samuel Foresta gives us another very useful piece of information. I don't like the state because it mean. Nailed it. Have you read Zoe Baker's book? Yes, and I was just pitching it earlier. Is the Velociraptor a crypto-fascist? What are these questions? I simply want to know about the ethnic and cultural issues of the Bretons and Occitans and how anarchism would suit them. What the fuck? Kind of weirdly specific. The Bretons. What? Is that British people? Anyway, Brittany, France. Oh, the Bretons are from France. I see. Okay, well, why is that relevant? Why is that the people we're focusing on here? Oh, the Bretons are Celts in France. Oh, okay, now I'm understanding. I kind of feel like Demon Prince is saying what I was thinking. He's obsessed with what would happen to quirky white people in global anarchism. But I guess I do think that there is some distinction here about the Celts. They do have a history of being oppressed as a people. And it is weird to focus on ethnicity this much. But anyway, yeah, Bretonnians like in Warhammer, or like the Bretons in Elder Scrolls. That's what I was thinking. Okay. Have you read anything by Modibo Kadali? I do plan on it. I do plan on reading his book Pan-African Social Ecology at some point. You asked already, what do I think of lentils? Lentils are great. Big fan. What is my favorite Pokemon? You know, when I was young and I played a lot more Pokemon, I had an answer, and the answer was Charizard. Is that just like a basic bitch kind of answer? You know, I played during the day of like Red and Blue, so there were way less options. Gyarados is super cool though. Gyarados, and then what is it? Scyther. Yeah, you know, I liked the ones that looked cool. That's what I was all about. Cool looking ones. Thoughts on Crime Think? You know, they published all kinds of different pieces. Some of them are good. Some of them I really don't like. Like the one that's like, revolution's supposed to be fun. I'm like, what? Wow. Great. Good luck. Good luck making it fun. I hope you can. That'd be wonderful. All right, everybody. Seems like we are packing it up here. Andrew Rivere, you should go watch my video after the revolution. That'd probably be helpful for you. Because the video will use language that I think you'll be familiar with, but I just understand that's not the language a lot of anarchists would use for those concepts, but hopefully that will help you understand the concepts nonetheless. Yeah, I see many anarchists say that anarchism against all hierarchy, however. Yeah, that's because they are using hierarchy to be synonymous with a hierarchical power structure. This is true across the literature. Bookchin, I'm the one who developed this term, hierarchical power structure. In a general sense, hierarchy entails a power structure for most people and most theorists. But I was trying to discern between the two in order to create rigor and analytical clarity. So what I think most anarchists, or pretty much all anarchists, are talking about is a hierarchical power structure. So yeah. I'm personally am fine with people making a hierarchy equivalent to a hierarchical power structure. I don't think it does much damage because the examples I gave, those examples are pretty minor, right? But anyway, we only got like 2 minutes left, so this seems like a good place to end. Go leave a comment below. Probably helps it a little bit in the algorithm. Don't know. Pretty much after these videos are done, it seems like nobody watches them. But if you've been watching this whole time through, you should go over and become a Patreon at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Anark, ANARK. Or if you'd like, you can become a member down below by clicking, I think it says like join or something here on YouTube. You can choose any tier. It's like $2, $5, $7, $10, and $20. Any of those would be enormously helpful for me. I appreciate you all very, very much. Go watch other videos on the channel. Go watch the video essays, y'all. So this is all about video essays. Anyway, I think that's it for today. It was good talking with y'all, and I'll see y'all next time.